Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm thrilled to have you joining us in person and watching online for the annual Minnesota Spring Parkinson Symposium, hosted by the American Parkinson's Disease Association, Minnesota chapter, the Parkinson's Foundation, Minnesota and Dakotas chapter, and the Udall Center at the University of Minnesota. We are the three leading organizations for Parkinson's disease advocacy in Minnesota, and we are so excited to be here. All right, I just want to share some highlights of where our friends are joining us from online and from in person. We have viewers all over the state of Minnesota, 11 other states, and 4 countries. 61% of attendees are people living with Parkinson's, and 36 have been living with Parkinson's for the last 5 years or recently diagnosed. 15% of our viewers and attendees are a spouse or partner to someone living with Parkinson's. Today's program is being recorded. Everyone will receive an email with the recording and resources that we'll talk about today. A few housekeeping pieces. This is a Parkinson's friendly event, so no problem if your pill timer goes off. If you're uncomfortable, please feel free to step to the side or to the back of the room while you listen and stand or stretch. Bathrooms are located out the back doors. We know this will be a long day, so we will try to engage a minute of stretching before each presentation. So feel free to participate if you want. In our packets on the table, you've got this stapled copy right here with the agenda, today's program, the speaker bios, and information on each host organization, and some pages for you to jot down any notes. You'll also find the evaluation in the center of the table. Please fill this out before you leave. When finished, you can leave it at the table or turn it into volunteers. These evaluations are very important to us. Our friends online, when you close the webinar, you will have a evaluation pop up. We really take into consideration planning for the future events based on the evaluations. We also have note cards. If you have any questions during presentations, jot down some notes. If you need help writing, raise your hand and we can have a volunteer come and assist. For our in-person, we have vendor passports. Make sure you fill those out by checking our vendor tables and turning it into the black bin at the back. And your name will be entered into a drawing for raffle for a Target gift card. You must be present to win. And lastly, we'll have a break at 11:15. And our online audience, if you have any difficulties or questions, please write it in the Q&A at the bottom of your banner. A big thank you to today's sponsors. At the gold level, we'd like to thank Amneal and Supernus. At the silver level, thank you, Acadia. And to our bronze sponsors, AbbVie, Abbott, Boston Scientific, and Medtronic. You may visit their tables along with other supporters and community organizations. Now let's get started and share a little bit about each host organization. I'm Erin McGee with the Parkinson's Foundation, Minnesota and Dakotas chapter. For those of you who are new to the Parkinson's Foundation, our mission is to make life better for people living with Parkinson's by improving care and advancing research toward a cure. In everything we do, we build on the energy, experience, and passion of our global Parkinson's community. Through our work, we bring together people with Parkinson's, caregivers, medical professionals, and researchers to ensure every person with Parkinson's has access to the best care. We also support cutting-edge research that leads to breakthroughs in treatments and a cure, and work to empower people with Parkinson's and their families with resources and emotional support they need to live well. Just a couple highlights I would like to share. Since the founding of the Parkinson's Foundation, we have funded more than $449 million in research. And since 2010, we've provided 678 scientists with research grants, helping to transform the way we diagnose and treat Parkinson's. We have a genetics initiative called PD Generation that is testing for PD-related genes and offers genetic counseling to people with Parkinson's at no cost. It is administered on site or via an at-home test. We also have our arm in the Parkinson's virtual biotech, which is providing funding to companies looking to develop new therapies to treat and cure Parkinson's. Over the next 3 years, we invest a minimum of $3 million into the Parkinson's Virtual Biotech Fund, the drug development arm of Parkinson's UK. This global movement aims to deliver new treatments in years, not decades. Our vision is to ensure that people with Parkinson's have access to equitable and quality care. The Global Care Network helps people get us there by delivering care to more than 200,000 people every year. The Global Care Network consists of centers of excellence, comprehensive care centers. Both must demonstrate multiple disciplinary care and obtain these prestigious designations. We also offer professional education for physical therapists, nurses, OT, speech as well. We also have community partners in Parkinson's care who are training long-term care communities and home care agencies about Parkinson's. And lastly, my favorite is getting the education and resources out to the community, like today. We have materials guide for you to help along any stages or symptoms of Parkinson's. You can check out our website, find new resources for living with Parkinson's, learn about research and ways to get involved. We also have a helpline, 1-800-4PD-INFO or 473-4636. Where you can talk to a Parkinson's specialist between 8 and 6 p.m. Central Time. And with that, I'm pleased to pass it on to Anthony Tollfree.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anthony Tollfree, and I am the program director for the American Parkinson's Disease Association Minnesota chapter. So welcome to the 2024 Spring Parkinson Symposium. So founded in 1961, APDA has raised and invested more than $252 million to provide outstanding patient services and educational programs, to elevate public awareness about Parkinson's disease, and support research designed to unlock the mysteries of PD and ultimately put an end to the disease. Our mission is that every day we provide the support, education, and research that will help everyone impacted by Parkinson's disease live life to the fullest. So no matter where you live, APDA is here for you. We are the largest grassroots network fighting Parkinson's disease, as we are the boots on the ground here for you every step of the way. We have a network of 13 APDA chapters and 12 information and referral centers around the country. Each chapter and center provides programs and services that supports the Parkinson's community. APDA also has 8 centers for advanced research around the country. These centers facilitate research at the forefront of investigations into finding a cause, treatments, and finding a cure or cures for Parkinson's disease. So, as I mentioned, some of our programs and services provided by APDA include phone and email helplines staffed by local experts in Parkinson's resources, connecting you with local support groups and exercise classes statewide, offering our APDA Financial Hardship Fund there for those with PD who are currently experiencing financial difficulties, and our specialty support programs such as our press support group for newly diagnosed individuals, our Connecting Through Arts Creative Arts program, and our APDA Good Start program. So in addition to the resources that we have here on the ground, we can connect with anyone anywhere through our extensive website or our toll-free number, which is 800-223-2732. I think I went too far. And there's a tremendous amount of useful content on our website as well, including information about the disease itself, education and support details about the research that we fund, and so much more. We also have a calendar of virtual events that allows you to join free virtual Parkinson's classes around the country. So some of these classes include exercise, singing, dancing, yoga, and Tai Chi, and many more. We also have an extensive list of publications on our website available for you to download, or you can order free copies to be mailed to you at no cost at all. And almost all of our publications are available in Spanish as well. We also offer a library of webinars archived on our website for you to watch anytime that it's convenient for you. And this includes past educational events, events with conferences, symposiums hosted by APDA. With that, I am pleased to welcome Dr. Gerald Vitek.
Oh, it stands over this? Okay, good. I hate standing at the podium. How many people here are from Minnesota, natives? Yeah, vast majority. So I'm the head of the Department of Neurology. I grew up in Minnesota. How many people here have heard of Meadowlands? Oh my God. So when I was gone on the East Coast, I could say that word. No one knew anything about what I was talking about. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our Udall Center. So you've heard about this before, probably ad nauseum. You probably heard more about it than the vast majority of people. But this Udall Center is the Parkinson's Disease Center of Excellence for Research. It's funded by the National Institutes of Health. And so what it's all about is finding new treatments for Parkinson's disease, but also understanding the disease. If you don't understand what the problem is, it's hard to fix it. So basically, what do we need to do to improve your lives? That's the question that we have to ask when we're doing this kind of work. And really, we have to understand what causes the problem before you can get in there and try to fix it. So we're trying to understand the things that change in your brain when you get Parkinson's disease. We all know that you lose these cells that make dopamine. But dopamine is an important drug, does a lot of things in the body besides movement, controlling movement. It also affects your sleep, can affect your thinking, your cognition. And years ago, when we asked patients, what are the biggest things that bother you? We thought it'd be stiffness, slowness. No, it was cognition, it was sleep, gait and balance, freezing of gait, things like that. Things that don't respond typically as well to dopamine. So this grant is dedicated to looking at not only the movement problems, but the other things like sleep and cognition. The second thing we have to do is train the new generation. So I'm 72. At some point, I'm not going to be doing this work anymore. I really like what I do, so I'll stay doing it as long as I can, but you need to train the new generation that's coming through. And the last thing is to engage with all of you to get a better understanding of what the things are that really bother you. So I was shocked at that meeting when basically the things that people really brought up as an issue for them was more cognition and sleep. So the Udall Center, this is Morris K. Udall. He's a representative from, I think it's from Colorado or Utah. He got Parkinson's in 1961, and he stayed working until 1991. So Parkinson's disease doesn't mean that you're going to have to stop whatever you do. That's not the case. It's just a different way to live, what it ends up being. But this started Udall Centers. Udall Centers were funded by the NIH. When I started, there were 10 Udall Centers. Now there were 5 as of 2 years ago. I will tell you, the only thing harder than getting a Udall Center is keeping a Udall Center. They're funded for 5 years. The document we put in was 900 pages long. To give you an idea of how long it takes you to put this together. Just recently, we lost one, lost another. And last year, they didn't fund any new centers. And the quality that required to get funded is high. So there's probably 40 people that work on this Udall Center. And when you put a proposal in, it takes a long time. So we're finishing our 3rd year. We have 2 more years left. We're already starting to look at what are the new things we need to try to venture into. So we're going to be spending the next 2 years preparing for this submission again. So the Udall Center has, you can't see that, and that's okay. It just, there's 4 projects in the Udall Center, each one tackling a different problem, but each one fits together. So what you're asking in project 1 is also helping project 2. Project 2 helps project 1 and project 3, and project 3 helps project 1 and 2. And the catalyst is a new project that's venturing forth on some new idea. And then there's 4 cores that support that: administration, statistics, clinical, and imaging. And imaging at the University of Minnesota is probably one of the best imaging centers, not just in the United States, but in the world. They feel they're number 1, and Max Planck in Germany thinks they're number 1. So somebody's number 1, at least number 2. Our folks think they're number 1. So what is this Udall Center supposed to do? What are we dedicated to looking at? We've taken a different approach than a lot of people do. But basically, 2 goals of the center. What changes in your brain, in the circuits in your brain? Because basically your brain works like circuits. It's a big electrical circuit. A lot of things connect to each other. But if one thing goes wrong, it's kind of like losing a fuse in your house. Some of the lights go out. Sometimes they flicker. They don't quite connect right. And that's what's going on in your brain. So these circuits are malfunctioning. We have to understand what's wrong, and then we have to be able to figure out a way to get in there and change those circuits so that they start to function more normally. And that's what these brain pacemakers do. These leads that go into these deep brain structures that are abnormal, functioning abnormally. I'm not going to go through all the questions. I was going to do that, but I don't think I want to do that. I think there's just, you're going to get a lot of this stuff later in the day. So I'm just going to flip right through all of this and go to this. So while there's a lot of people working from very different disciplines, we have engineers, we have imagers, neurosurgeons, neurologists, neuroscientists, psychiatrists that have physics degrees. That doesn't fit, right? A neurosurgeon that's got a mathematics degree. Again, really? But these are unique individuals, for example, that work in our Udall right now. And those 2 people, David Darrow, the neurosurgeon who's the mathematician, and Alex Herman, the physicist who's a psychiatrist, have come up with some novel ideas about maybe we can help cognition with stimulation. And the results are quite intriguing. I brought them on board because I wanted the young, new, vigorous scientists joining us in our Udall, and they have not failed to show me some very interesting data on cognition, which people always thought could not be improved with stimulation. I think that's wrong. So what do we need? Well, we need your help with these clinical studies that we do. We need people who are willing to participate in the research. If you don't participate in the research, we can't do the research. But by participating, and that's just kind of a corny phrase, but it's true, you can help us to help you. Because everybody on this Udall is dedicated to the same thing. And the rewards that we get when we can see someone get better with something that we've brought to the forefront makes everybody feel good. Why else would I keep doing this at 72? And we can't do it without you. We can't. If we don't have participants to do the research with us, we can't move forward. And there are things not besides the deep brain stimulation work and the brain pacemakers. There's studies on exercise, new drug therapies, all kinds of different things that are being done at the University of Minnesota. So if you have the opportunity or someone mentions it to you or there's a research study you can participate in, for example, there's a new exercise study run by Dr. Colin McKinnon, and exercise is extremely good for you. If you're over 50, you need to get a okay to go ahead and do it, but you really do need to stay active. And there's an old saying, if you don't use it, you lose it. And I think that's true. That's why it's important. So the last thing I'm gonna show you is a picture of a person before and after deep brain stimulation. On the right, on the left, you can see them before stimulation. On the other side, you see them after deep brain stimulation, the pacemakers. I know this sounds invasive and it sounds, gee, but I really want to do that. I've never had anybody undergo this procedure that didn't tell me they should have done it sooner. Now, there is a small risk of it. We can talk about things like that, but this isn't going to happen until we think you're at that point that you need to have it done. So I just wanted to, again, bring up the UDOL and let you know that we're all working very hard. We enjoy the work. We particularly enjoy seeing the benefits of the work with everybody in this room. So thank you once again, and we're going to move on. I think Tony's going to introduce the next speaker. So thanks for your attention. One last thing. What'd you think of this really rough Minnesota winter we had? It's one of the things that made life a little difficult to recruit as the head of the department, but most of the people I get are people that have been from Minnesota who left and want to come home, like we all do.
Perfect. All right, so at this time, I just want to remind everyone you have note cards at your table. So remember to write down questions for your speakers. We're going to have a Q&A for both our morning speakers following a 15-minute break. So if you don't have a note card, please raise your hand. Or if you need assistance, raise your hand and a volunteer can come around to help you with that. So at this time, I would like to introduce Dr. Eleanor Orehek. Dr. Orehek is a clinical neurologist and deep brain stimulation program director with the Naran Neurology Clinic. She specializes in movement disorders such as Parkinson's disease, essential tremor, dystonia, ataxia, and more. Dr. Orehek completed her neurology residency at Boston University Medical Center in Boston, Massachusetts, before moving to her fellowship in movement disorders at the University of Minnesota in the Department of Neurology. Dr. Orehek now leads the DBS program at Naran Neurology Clinic and served as the medical director for APDA Minnesota chapter from 2017 through 2023. We thank her for her time, her dedication, and her continued efforts in supporting our PD community. Please welcome Dr. Eleanor Orehek.
Morning. Thanks for that nice introduction. Yes, as Anthony was saying, I'm going to talk to you about cognitive changes, a nice easy topic for cover in 30 minutes today. But so I've been at Naran for 10 years practicing, and this is definitely a topic that comes up frequently and has a significant impact on people's day-to-day function and quality of life. So while it's difficult to talk about sometimes and to cover, it's definitely important to recognize the issues that can be part of Parkinson's. So I'll go through some definitions of terms that we use just to have a better understanding of what we're talking about, what we mean by cognition, and different diagnoses that you might encounter, the symptoms that you might experience related to cognitive changes in Parkinson's, how we evaluate those changes, and most importantly, some strategies and treatment options to be able to live better with the symptoms. So Parkinson's, first coined by James Parkinson, was described in 1817, is now the second most common neurodegenerative disease behind Alzheimer's disease. So obviously impactful and important for people and everybody. And the neurodegenerative disease just is defined by a disease that affects the brain and nervous system and causes dysfunction of the nerve cells over time and progression of symptoms. So alpha-synuclein, I don't know if this is a protein people have heard about, but is central to the disease process. It's a normal occurring protein, and as Dr. Vitek was saying, it's important to understand what is going on in the brains of patients with Parkinson's, also understanding what it's normally supposed to do in the normal role is still being worked out, but has a central role in causing problems in the nerve cells and misfolds and causes clumps of protein called Lewy bodies. So that's another term you may have heard, which we'll talk a little bit more about. Here, so for symptoms of Parkinson's, there's a lot of attention played to the motor symptoms, tremor, slowness, stiffness. These are the more visible symptoms. It's how we diagnose the disease, so there's definitely a lot of attention paid to these, but important to recognize under the surface what we call the non-motor symptoms, which is a wide variety of different symptoms, cognitive changes being one of them, and one of the more impactful non-motor symptoms that you might have to face. So here, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but this just from a pathology standpoint. So Brock was a German, or is a German anatomist who studied the brains of Parkinson's, trying to get a sense of how the disease might progress, and looked at the nerve cells and found usually at early stages, the Lewy bodies or the pathologies found in non-motor areas like the olfaction, so loss of sense of smell can be what we call a premotor symptom. Constipation, autonomic nervous system changes. As the disease progresses, that's when you can see more of the motor symptoms, and then the cognitive symptoms come later as the disease progresses further into the different areas of the brain. So cognition, defined as mental action of acquiring knowledge through thought, experience, and the senses. So clearly an important part of who we are. These are the areas of the cognition that we'll talk about, kind of the main different areas. As you can see, memory is just the one area of how the brain processes information. So attention is being able to focus on the important information and ignore distractions, paying attention, such as reading a book, listening to what I'm saying while this silly goldfish is going across the screen. There's a lot more distractions in our environment with the digitalized era that we live in, so it becomes even more important to be able to kind of pay attention to what's important and be able to limit distractions. Working memory, so this is a combination between attention and also some executive function abilities, but this is holding information in your head while you complete tasks like mental arithmetic. If you've had a doctor ask you to do serial sevens where you have to subtract 7 from 100, that's some of the working memory mental arithmetic. Day to day, doing a recipe, following a recipe, holding some of that information in your head while you're trying to follow the steps. That might be another area that you would use working memory. That's an area of executive function. Other areas of executive function, this is important because this is a lot of what Parkinson's can affect. If you think about a CEO, what a CEO would need to be good at, this is organizing, planning, decision-making, multitasking, inhibition control. So a lot of important areas of how we get through the day. Visual spatial function, so you can think of this as your Lego brain, being able to construct things, depth perception, navigating around places, telling distances between cars, or if you're trying to park your car, staying in the lines. So specific to memory, I'm not going to get too in the weeds on the different areas of memory, but we think of memory as explicit and implicit. So explicit is more what we call declarative memory. So these are semantic things like knowledge about the world, facts that you've learned, and episodic memory, so personal experiences that you might have been through. These both take effort to try to recall and remember. And then implicit memory are the things you've learned that are more automatic. So if anybody's seen Caitlin Clark shoot a 3-pointer, she's acting a lot on procedural memory. So she's done repetition over repetition of taking shots, and doesn't have to think anymore about where to put her feet, how to hold the ball, how to shoot it. So this is my first plug of exercise in Parkinson's. Some of the big therapy things might seem repetitious or mundane, but this is acting on some of that procedural memory. So if you're learning how to step with your heel down first, pick up your feet, the more automatic that becomes and the more repetition you do, that's acting on your procedural memory. So the earlier you do that in the disease and the more often you do it, the better. So other areas of memory are more conditioned responses. The amygdala is important for attaching emotions to some of your memories. So it just shows how complex the brain is as far as remembering. Procedural memory uses the basal ganglia, and then there's the prefrontal cortex is the front part of the brain. So there's a lot of circuits of the brain that are utilized to learn and store information. Language, this is speech fluency, comprehension, naming things. So when we say mild cognitive impairment, I don't know if this is a term you've heard about or aware of, can occur in Parkinson's, but is not specific to Parkinson's. So there's a lot of different causes of mild cognitive impairment. And it just means that you have cognitive changes that are measurable on our formal testing, but not yet impacting your ability to be independent and do what we call activities of daily living. And then this term dementia. So I think this is the term everybody's heard, everybody's aware of, maybe fearful of, but it's hard to understand exactly what does it mean, how do you diagnose it, what causes it, and it's complicated, so that's why it's confusing. But it stems from the Latin root demens, which is out of one's mind. But now in the medical field, we use it to indicate someone that has cognitive changes to the point where you're now having difficulty with those activities of daily living. So that would include things like cleaning and maintaining your house, navigating around the community, either driving on your own or arranging transportation, preparing meals, managing your medications, finances, all these important things that can become difficult. So this slide shows, again, the dementia being the broad term. I have a lot of patients that ask me, what's the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's, or just trying to sort through what all these terms mean. And the differences, or how I explain it, is dementia is the term that we use just indicating there's that impairment level. And then the next step is try to figure out what's causing it. And that can be a more challenging step. Because as you know, people are individuals, the brain's complicated. It'd be nice if everybody fit into little boxes, but that's not how the world works, right? So the most common cause is Alzheimer's. And then you have vascular dementia. Lewy body, which I'll get more into, is a percentage of causes of dementia. So this term Lewy body dementia, also complicated. I think a lot of people in the medical community don't fully understand how we define these different terms. So if you're confused, that's understandable. I would be surprised if you weren't. Particularly Lewy body dementia and dementia with Lewy bodies, right? Just same words in different orders, meaning different things. So the best I can explain it is Lewy body dementia is the broader term. People with Parkinson's disease who've had motor symptoms for several years can progress to the point where you have dementia. That's called Parkinson's disease dementia. People that come in with cognitive changes and their motor symptoms within the same year, where cognitive symptoms are going to be forefront of their symptoms right at the beginning, that we would call dementia with Lewy bodies. But both are under the broader term of Lewy body dementia. So those can be thrown out, and it's hard. Lewy bodies, again, being more the pathologic changes of those abnormal protein clumps. So those are in the brains of everybody with Parkinson's, regardless of whether there's dementia. So normal aging. So this comes up a lot, not just related to cognition, but I'm having this symptom. Am I just getting older? Is it my Parkinson's, right? Like just over again and again, we have these discussions with people, and it's hard. It's sometimes because there are unfortunate changes that happen in the aging process that we can't reverse or slow down. If anybody has any magic fixes to the aging process, let me know. But sorting through that can be difficult. So recognizing that, yes, there is some decline, usually since after your 20s, with slowness of recalling information. Where did you learn information from? Remembering what events are coming up in the future. Those things can be what we call normal aging. And so separating that out from what might be your Parkinson's can be challenging, but there can be some tests and things I'll talk about that can help with that. This also I just want to talk about because it comes up a lot. I went into the room and I couldn't remember what I went in for. So if this is your main symptom, I'm going to reassure you that this is actually a normal thing. Because so your brain, because it has so much to do, wants to be efficient about remembering information. So it uses context of your environment, things you're in. So if you're in one room thinking of something and then go to another room, it thinks you're in a new context. And so the information in the old room doesn't matter anymore. So, so you can get over this by keeping in your mind what it is you need to go get over and over again, and not think of other things or get distracted by other things. That will help you overcome this effect. So specific to Parkinson's, there are some changes we'll talk about. So with attention, it's harder to focus on things. You can get more easily distracted. If you sit down and try to read a book, you might read the sentence over and over again. Shifting attention is more difficult. It's important if you're talking to someone, having important conversations, turn the TV off, turn the radio on. If you're driving and get easily distracted, try to limit anything in the car while you're driving. Even having GPS on helps us get around, but can be distracting for us. So as much as you can, if you're having trouble attending to things, limit as many distractions as you can is helpful. Executive function. So this is all those decision-making, planning. This can be all affected in Parkinson's. And so it's helpful, which I'll talk more about management tips, but again, trying to simplify decisions, simplify tasks that you're doing or projects that you want to complete, try to break things down into more simplified steps is going to help you succeed. So usually later on in the disease, the more visual spatial things can get impacted. So this is maybe more difficulty navigating around, finding your way to places, judging distances between things. If you notice your car is parked too close to other cars, or having trouble getting too close to other cars while you're driving. So the language is less affected in Parkinson's versus a disease like Alzheimer's, where language can be affected earlier. Most common language thing people with Parkinson's might describe as that tip of the tongue phenomenon, where it's there, it's just taking your brain longer to think of that word. Again, something that can be part of that aging retrieval process too. And then memory usually is more of a retrieval difficulty. So storage is intact. You can store the information, but you need more context, you need more cues, more help to remember and retrieve that information. Or again, it just takes you longer. So when you're talking about the spectrum of what we see in Parkinson's, there can be changes even early on. Usually it's more mild. So bradyphrenia is something we call, like, so bradykinesia is slowness of movement. But bradyphrenia is just that slowness of thought. So you might feel like, yeah, it's taking me longer to get through things. And it's subjective if we did neuropsych testing, it might not be measurable on testing. When it gets to the point of mild cognitive impairment, that's where it is measurable, but not impacting your ability to do your ADLs, the activities of daily living. And then can progress to the dementia when it does start to impact those activities of daily living. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because it's a whole separate thing, but Parkinson's disease psychosis, so that characterized by hallucinations, delusions, can be more common if you have dementia. Medication certainly can play a role, but they're not the sole cause of this. Tend to be visual things, seeing small animals, seeing people, not always bothersome, especially if you're aware that they're there. Can be more manageable. There's medications we can use to help if they do get to be more impactful or intrusive. So why these symptoms are happening, again, really important for us to sort out the disease pathology. We have some knowledge of that alpha-synuclein and the misfolding and causing dysfunction in the nerve cells, changes dopamine signaling, right? So dopamine, we focus a lot on the motor symptoms, but has a role, as Dr. Vitek was saying, in cognitive processes and other cognitive functions. So it's important to recognize that sometimes we do see being on your levodopa, right, can make you feel like you're, even though we don't talk about it helping with cognition, it can make you feel like you're thinking better. If your meds wear off, you can feel that kind of cognitive fog or slowness come over you. So there is a definite role and sometimes benefit in getting your meds right. And then acetylcholine is another brain chemical that can be involved in executive function, learning, memory. So that's another chemical that's affected by the disease. Age is definitely a risk factor. Older age, more likely to have some cognitive impairment with the disease. How long you've had Parkinson's can be a risk factor. If you have, so we talk about subtypes of Parkinson's, there's a tremor predominant subtype, there's akinetic rigid where you present with gait difficulty. That seems to be some increased risk of more cognitive changes in that subtype. And then the more we learn about the genetics of Parkinson's, we're defining different types, sometimes based on the mutation that is associated with your disease, and are finding that some mutations like the GBA mutation or the SNCA gene can increase your risk of cognitive changes. This is a newer area. That PD generation study that Aaron was talking about is helping kind of define people's genetic mutations if you have one, and hopefully will lead to better specific treatments. So what are the chances? Like everybody wants to know, well, what am I looking at? Am I going to get these cognitive changes? When am I going to get these cognitive changes? And those are tough, important questions, but hard to answer because it varies. Like, as you know, everybody with Parkinson's is different. So we have a really hard time saying for sure these are going to happen and what the timeline is. Up to, like, the percentages vary in cognitive changes, but up to 40% even at the time of diagnosis have some mild changes. And then the percentages 10 years out from diagnosis for dementia go up to 30 to 50%, somewhere in there. But again, there's a big variability depending on how the study is done. If you have concerns, it's tough, especially caregiver, if you're noticing change in your loved one. Should I say something? How do I say something? It's important though to talk to your doctor about the changes you're noticing. Try to be specific as you can. What are you seeing either in yourself or your loved one? What's the timeline? If changes are happening over days to weeks, that's a red flag. Because Parkinson's progresses slowly, right? So anything where you go, last week they were doing well and now they're confused, that's more likely an infection, bladder infection, pneumonia. So you got to get that in and get checked out. Other things we look at, moods. Our next speaker is talking about mood changes in Parkinson's, closely linked with cognition. So important to address how you're sleeping. So anybody that's been sleep deprived knows your brain's not going to work well, right? So addressing sleep, and that comes up a lot in Parkinson's. So we got to look at that. We got to look at your medications. Are you taking any medications that could be impacting your cognition? Bladder medications, for example, are a big implicator in that. Vitamin deficiencies. So a lot of potentially correctable things, right? But if you don't talk about it, if you don't get it checked out, you might miss that. Other tools we have, so brain MRI, this helps look for other things. So as you may know, an MRI does not diagnose Parkinson's. We can't stage Parkinson's based on an MRI, but it will show strokes or tumors, other things that might show up. So it's important to get a brain MRI if there's been a change. A PET scan, so the main PET scan is looking at glucose and patterns of how your brain's working. If there's some cognitive change or dementia, and we're trying to sort out if there's a mixture of causes, right? So Parkinson's is playing a role, but maybe it's Alzheimer's, maybe there's something else going on. A PET scan can sometimes help sort that out. And then neuropsychologic testing is definitely more detailed. So if there's significant changes, or if we're not sure if it's aging, this is one way to sort out normal age, because there's a lot of age match controls that we can compare and normative data. And then the MoCA is shown here. So you might have seen this test. This is the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. So this looks at all the areas of cognition, but to a less detailed degree that neuropsych testing does. So importantly, I'll try to wrap up with treatment options. So medications play a role, but a small role. Unfortunately, right now, we don't have a lot of good medications to address cognitive performance. Be wary of supplements that claim that they will, right? Prevagen. I get asked about Prevagen 5 times a day. No evidence that there's benefit. You're better off spending your money on good fruits and vegetables, eat all the colors, healthy proteins, cut out the sugars and processed foods. That's going to benefit you a lot more than any particular supplement or pill. So for medications, we have a few options. So rivastigmine is the only FDA-approved medication for Parkinson's disease dementia. That increases that acetylcholine, that chemical that can help with memory. Galantamine and donepezil are other medications in that same category. And then memantine is in its own category. Studies are more mixed there, but can be helpful. So research, I'm not going to spend time on. Dr. Almeida is going to do a talk on research, but it's important to have hope that the future will get better with better treatments, better understanding of the disease. Biomarkers will help us study the disease, diagnose it earlier, hopefully, and track disease progression. So hopefully with developing better biomarkers will lead to better treatments for disease progression. Here's exercise again. I like to hammer exercise home. So we think about exercise as helping us physically, but there's benefits cognitively as well, especially the aerobic exercise. At least 30 minutes, 3 to 4 times a week. If you can do 45 minutes or an hour to a moderate level, that's even better. And then there's exercise classes like boxing, right, that get your aerobic levels up, but also have you multitask. So you're just challenging that part of the brain that's becoming more difficult, right? Like doing 2 things at once, you got to count while you punch, or different exercises that challenge you. That's important. Staying social is important. This can get more challenging though, especially in bigger group settings. You might notice you're sitting back, or if you're a caregiver, you might notice they're less engaged. It's just harder for you to keep up, right, with some of those slowness and processing changes. Paying attention to everything that's going on is harder. If you can schedule smaller groups or one-on-one things, that's going to be better and easier for you to have an engaged conversation. than if you're going to a party. Mental activities. So there's not any like specific mental activity that's going to be the gold standard. The online games, if you don't enjoy the game or the activity, I wouldn't spend my time doing it. Try to find hobbies, things, games, puzzles, whatever you enjoy. Try to spend your time doing that during the day. And routine's important. So the more routine, the more scheduling you do, because it's hard with the executive changes. You might not know how to plan or organize your day. It's not laziness. It's just your brain isn't able to focus on how do I schedule the activities that I know are important. So the more you can have recurring things, like I go to my boxing class these days, I go to meet this person on this day, the more successful you're going to be. And try to make technology your friend. A lot of us may hate technology or not understand it, but there's a lot of good tools that you can use, like the alarms, having some of them, like Alexa, will tell you this is the 9 o'clock pill. You can have it say whatever you want. So utilizing technology with calendars or reminders can really help you feel successful. And simplifying things. We're not here to torture yourself, right? You want things to be challenging, but set yourself up for success. Or if you're a caregiver and they're not able to make decisions as well, just give 2 choices instead of what do you want for dinner? So having a lot of clocks and calendars around can help if you're having more trouble staying oriented to time. You got to have patience if you're talking to someone with Parkinson's, because again, the thoughts are there. It's just slower. So take your time, limit distractions, and make sure you're getting the response from the person that you want. And maintain that balance between safety and independence. Because the urge might be there, well, I'll just do it for you if you're having difficulty. But it's important to be able to do the things that are meaningful to you if you can do them safely. This comes up with driving. Driving is a big thing, right? It's hard to talk about, but it's important because it's a big safety concern. And it can get to a point where driving is difficult just because of all the things we've talked about. So if you have concerns, bring it up. There's formal driving evaluations you can get that makes it more objective rather than just subjectively trying to say, I don't think you should drive anymore. And it takes a team for every aspect of Parkinson's, but particularly with cognitive impairment changes. Enlist family and friends to be there, both for physical support, but also that social support. Occupational and speech therapists can help with communication. They can help with some of those cognitive adaptive factors that can help you live more successfully. Address your mental health, work with your neurologist, caregiver, support groups. Coming to events like this is good to stay knowledgeable, stay aware. Final messages, awareness is important. So being here, going online, learning about the disease, that's going to give you power. That's going to give you control over how to live well with this. Talk to your doctor about your concerns. Exercise, again. And just try to maintain that balance between challenging yourself, being successful, continuing to be independent, but acknowledging, yeah, I might not be able to do the things that I could do 10 years ago or 5 years ago. What can I do? How can I modify this activity? If you still like cooking, but it's harder to follow a recipe, maybe you'll have to help in the kitchen rather than take over the whole meal. But you still want to try to find ways to be successful and do the things you enjoy doing. Have patience with yourself, have patience with your loved ones, and have hope for the future that we'll discover better treatments and better disease management options. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Rayhack. Let's go ahead and feel a little stretch action, stand up, or rock in your seat side to side if you're unable to stand. Stretch, point those toes, flex those feet, arms overhead. Next time I'll get the Hokey Pokey song and we can do that together. No, I won't do that to you. Just another reminder, if you've got questions from that presentation, jot them down on your index cards. If you have yours completed, raise your hand, we'll come by and grab them. But also keep them close by for our next presenter. You've got yours done. I will come to you, sir. You can stay right there. Yeah. Oh, I see another one. I'll come to you after. All right, we got our wiggles out. Oh, let's do one group exercise real quick. Everybody, arms up, reach for the sky, stretch, flick those hands, open and close, get those fingers ready for writing all your questions down. One more time, up and down. Good. All right, we'll have you take a seat as I'm pleased to introduce our second speaker. Laura de Hosthouse is a physical therapist at Struthers Parkinson Center, which is a center of excellence under the Parkinson's Foundation. She specializes in rehabilitation and exercise programming for individuals with Parkinson's disease and related movement disorders. She has completed advanced training with Parkinson's Foundation with a focus on addressing mental health in her role on the healthcare team. So let's give a warm welcome to Laura. I was like, okay, where'd she go? All right, you can use this clicker. You're welcome. Get these out of your way.
Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here this morning to chat a little bit more about just mood changes with Parkinson's and some strategies we can use to help deal with those mood changes. I admit I'm a little anxious myself being up here in front of everybody, but more than anything, happy to be here. So, to start off, I just want to highlight some of the major mood changes that are extremely common with Parkinson's disease. At the top, anxiety, depression, extremely common. We also see that things like fatigue or apathy, which is just lack of interest, lack of motivation, irritability, sadness, anger are all really, really common emotions, mood changes to deal with kind of along your journey with Parkinson's disease. And so I do just really want to emphasize that these moods, these changes are symptoms of Parkinson's disease. They are caused by the loss of that dopamine chemical in your brain that is our happy chemical. It does a lot for our mood, our motivation, our movement. And so it's natural, it's expected as we develop Parkinson's disease and we're losing that dopamine to kind of go through a lot of these emotions. We do often find that just with all the different motor symptoms, non-motor symptoms that come along with Parkinson's disease, these mood changes really do have the biggest impact on quality of life. And so not only does that loss of dopamine lead to some of these emotions and mood changes, but there are other things in life that happen that can contribute or exacerbate some of these mood changes. Certainly, if anxiety, depression are things you dealt with before your diagnosis, living in Minnesota, seasonal depression can be a big one. I know we had a nice warm winter, but it also was quite cloudy and gloomy. And that can really have an effect on our mood, our motivation. Certainly, other things can come up in life with friends, with family, even in our greater society, the world, this 24-hour news cycle that we're subjected to can really have an impact on how we're feeling. And then, the global pandemic, I think also really kind of catapulted some discussion on mental health and mood into our mainline discussion, being home, being isolated, being taken away from our support system, our activities, our places we go to enjoy things, really does have a negative impact on us. Certainly, there are, some kind of Parkinson's milestones along your course with the journey that can also kind of exacerbate some of these feelings of depression and anxiety. Of course, first getting diagnosed, kind of accepting and coping with the diagnosis, sharing news with friends, with families, with your workplace, if you're still working, can all really bring on anxiety, feelings of depression, sadness, or loss. We talk a lot about, managing symptoms in public, dealing with a tremor or freezing of gait can sometimes be anxiety inducing. And of course, we see that anxiety can almost bring some of those symptoms out a little bit more. It can be kind of a vicious cycle with anxiety, with symptoms getting out there. And then, some other milestones that even Dr. Rahek touched on. Maybe there comes a time where it's not safe to drive anymore. That can be a really challenging kind of thing to go through. Or maybe having to move from the home you've built and created for the last 30, 40 years into maybe a more accessible place or an assisted living facility. Some of those different milestones can really affect how you're feeling, your mood. Times where we really want to make sure that we are maybe really utilizing some strategies to care for yourself, to get support with others. I also just want to take a second just to acknowledge some of the stigma that really surrounds mental health and mental health conversations. Certainly historically, depression, anxiety really weren't recognized or acknowledged as health conditions, medical conditions. We've come a long way, I'm happy to say, but I think there is still just that kind of stigma around it. It can be hard to talk about, it can be hard to bring up. But again, I just really want to emphasize these feelings, these emotions, they are symptoms of the disease. It's not a reflection on you, it's not a weakness, and there is a lot we can do to help address these symptoms, improve your mood, improve your well-being, that we're really gonna highlight here today. So I just want to touch on like some traditional treatment for mood changes. Of course, medication is an extremely important factor for some folks. There's a lot of really good anxiety, depression medication out there you can talk with your doctor about. Psychotherapy or talk therapy, which could be done with a psychiatrist, a therapist, a counselor, in that one-on-one setting. Or maybe finding a support group and getting together with, other people who are living with Parkinson's, who really understand what you're going through, can be a really important kind of form of support and treatment for mental health. And then I also just want to acknowledge, sometimes maybe you'll meet with a therapist or a counselor, or even maybe try out a support group and maybe it just isn't quite the right fit for you or not exactly what you're looking for. And that's okay. I do encourage you to try somebody else, try another support group, keep looking until you find that person, that group that you really connect with, that you feel safe and comfortable with. And that can really be a part of your support team living with Parkinson's. And then I did put ECT on here just because it's something that you may see or read about. It has to do with kind of providing some electrical stimulation to the brain to help with depression. Not something that I will say I've seen or heard a lot of, but it is something that you might come across, or, if your doctor even brings it up, just wanted to include it there. What I really want to focus on today is the idea of self-care or different activities, hobbies, things that you can do at home with others to really help support, yourself, your well-being, your mood, kind of bringing you peace, relaxation, joy. And there are so many ways to go about this idea of self-care, so many ways to kind of tailor it to you, that part of it is finding things that, you do like, you do enjoy, um, and really kind of leaning into those things. And so, of course, as your PT here today, we got to talk about exercise. Exercise, as we have heard already this morning, is a hugely, hugely important factor in managing Parkinson's disease, motor symptoms, mood. Again, there are so many ways to go about exercise. That part of it is, what do you like? What do you enjoy? What are you hopefully going to stick with? Now, especially thinking about like mood and exercise, you'll commonly hear about like Tai Chi or yoga, these kind of mindful forms of exercise that do have a focus on, of course, moving your body, but kind of calming and quieting your mind. Can really help with that relaxation, rejuvenation. And then on the flip side, I think some like more higher intensity forms of exercise like boxing or high intensity interval training on a bike where you're really working hard, you're getting that heart rate elevated, that aerobic exercise that Dr. Urehek mentioned can also be a great outlet, I think, sometimes for like anxiety or anger, just kind of working through your body with some of those more vigorous types of exercise. Nature, I put up here. I actually read a book recently called Your Brain on Nature, and it was really interesting just the effect how something as simple as having some plants in the room that you're spending a majority of your time in can really help to ease anxiety, depression, and really boost your mood. And so with nature, getting outside as much as we can, especially in Minnesota when weather allows, if we can start our days getting out, getting a little bit of sun on our skin, that is something that can really kind of help wake us up, get us going, boost some of those mood chemicals in our day, getting out for a walk outdoors, or certainly things like tending to a home garden. That could be, of course, outdoors, or maybe like an indoor houseplant garden to keep you going through the winter. Um, Things like sleep hygiene, nutrition, hydration, really important, of course, for our health and well-being, but can also be kind of a self-care activity, if you will. So like with sleep hygiene, maybe creating like a bedtime routine where, a couple hours before bed, we know it's good for us to turn those screens off. Maybe take something like a relaxing bath or shower, light a candle. Maybe that's time you're reading your book or doing some journaling or listening to an audiobook. Just kind of taking some time to unwind from the day, start to lull ourselves into sleep. And then with nutrition, the Mediterranean diet, eating those colorful fruits, vegetables, is also really important for kind of feeding our brain, supporting our brain, and helping to kind of manage and balance that brain chemistry that is affected by Parkinson's and that loss of dopamine. Um, Music, journaling, whether that be listening to music, playing music, singing. We have a music therapist at Struthers who will work on songwriting with some folks as kind of another option for, journaling or writing. Something that is hopefully creative, artistic, maybe kind of just an outlet for you during your day. Um, the conference that I went to with a team of us from Struthers We had a lot of great speakers. One of them was actually from an improv club down in Chicago. And there was a group of people with Parkinson's who would go once a month or something to this improv club, and they'd have their own little improv group. That was a great outlet for their humor, kind of another form of a support group in a way. And then, some other kind of classic things that you'll often hear about, massage, acupuncture, meditation. And there's lots of ways to meditate. It doesn't necessarily have to be, sitting still in a chair and just trying not to think about anything. But there's a lot of really great, like, guided meditations or like a guided visualization where, yeah, you close your eyes. It might kind of lead you through a story of walking down a beach or something like that. Um, even kind of coming back to exercise, yoga, Tai Chi, you might even hear those referred to as like a moving meditation. And so, lots of ways to meditate, lots of ways to practice self care. Again, part of it is what brings you joy, what brings you comfort, what brings you peace, what kind of helps fill your cup. Now, I recognize that's a lot of stuff that can be a little overwhelming sometimes. Where do I even start? And so, one of the things that Dr. Orahek talked about as well is the idea of just creating a routine or creating some kind of schedule. It could be daily, it could be weekly, it could be monthly for certain things, but really trying to create somewhat of a routine that you're following consistently. I think just helps keep you on track, keeps you doing these things that we know are good for you, and ultimately should help you to feel better. Trying something new can be fun, exciting. Maybe there's something like, oh, I've heard all about Tai Chi. I've never tried it. I've always wanted to. That can be really beneficial about getting out there, trying something new. It also is good for our brains to kind of learn and be challenged by something new, maybe something different, maybe something that we're not quite used to. Getting out of the house, I think, is a huge thing, which kind of ties into making it social that I do want to talk a lot more about. But the more we can just get out of our house, whether it be to get outdoors or to do some sort of social activity or come to a conference today, just the more we can get out, the better. Um, Another thing that I learned at that conference that I enjoyed was this idea of doing like an intergenerational activity. So kids, grandkids, maybe you have a exercise instructor of a different generation or something like that. But there is a lot of benefit just to like connecting with and socializing and being with, folks maybe at a different point of life or different area than we are. Um, So, just a couple small things here when we think about, getting started with some of these things. Again, I know it can be overwhelming. And I like the idea of maybe setting like a small goal. Maybe I'm not doing anything for exercise. I'm going to start with like once a week, I'm going to get out and do XYZ. I think if we can set those small goals and achieve those small goals, it actually kind of releases a little bit of happy chemical dopamine in your brain and can be a really good thing for you. So kind of ties into celebrating those small victories. So in my last few minutes here, I do want to talk about the ideas of practicing mindfulness and really making it social or building a support team. I think this was kind of something that, again, was really kind of highlighted just when we were living with the pandemic, the shutdown, how critical just socialization and human connection really are to our health and well being. And so when we think of, a support team, a support system, of course, we got our friends, our family, our neighbors, our churches, faith institutions, different clubs, groups. but also want to make sure that captures your healthcare team. So, your neurologist, your primary care doctor, your physical therapist, occupational therapist, speech therapist, social worker, music therapist, everybody who you may cross paths with in your journey with Parkinson's is somebody who is on your support team, who's going to be available to help guide you maybe through some of these tougher times and can maybe help you work on some strategies at creating a routine or getting involved in a new activity or group or something like that. Another thing from that conference that I really took away is this idea of social prescribing. And so, as a PT, I'm every day prescribing different exercise routines for people to do, or maybe an exercise class to do. This idea of social prescribing is, I am going to recommend that this week you go out and you go to that book club that maybe you haven't been to in a couple of years or something like that. But really just the idea of I am prescribing you some socialization, some interaction with whoever. And then I recognize that can be intimidating sometimes to go out to be in a new group. It's not that, you have to go tell your whole life story, be the main person, spurring all the conversation in these groups, but even being with others in a group, kind of just being part of that network can have a lot of benefit for us as well. And so, practicing mindfulness is something that we can kind of define in a few different ways. And so, mindfulness meditation may be where we're, sitting, trying just to be present in the moment, maybe observe what you're seeing, what you're feeling, what you're hearing. In a larger sense, I like to talk about mindfulness as, focusing on what you can do today in this moment to find pleasure, enjoy life, and help you feel good. And so, even with some of these like self care activities, I want to call it like a mindful activity where you're doing something intentionally to take your mind maybe off of some of the worries that are happening and just kind of immersing yourself into this activity that, again, you enjoy. You helps you feel good, feel relaxed, refresh. Now that idea of really filling up your cup. And so I think at the end of the day, with self-care activities, with exercise, the ultimate goals are that we're really building that emotional wellness and resiliency. When we have that kind of strong foundation, I think we're better able to maybe manage or work through some of those maybe Parkinson's milestones that come up that can, take a dip in your mental health. Quality of life, I think, is overall the big thing that I talk about with all my clients. Of course, we know all the benefits of exercise, but at the end of the day, we just know the more active you are physically, socially, mentally, that does help to allow you to do better with Parkinson's, stay more mobile, keep doing all those things that you want to do, you enjoy, which kind of ties into the idea of just maintaining independence for the long term. So, next we are going to take just a little break. We got about 10 minutes here, and then myself and Dr. Urehek will be back to answer some questions for you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you again, Laura, for your presentation. So at this time, I'm going to ask that you continue to write down your questions for our speakers on your note cards. If you are done writing your questions down and all set, just raise your note cards in the air, and someone will come around, a volunteer will come around and collect them. Thank you.
All right, we've got a lot of questions to get to. So I know, unfortunately, we won't get to all of them as I've seen my stream of questions coming in from our online viewers as well, and lots of note cards for our in-person. So we'll do some Q&A with Dr. Rayak and Laura. Let's see. Laura, we'll start with you. As well, both of you talked about the interdisciplinary team approach. What role does a social worker play in a Parkinson's disease patient, and how do you connect with the social worker?
Maybe. Okay, there we go. All right. So at least at Struthers, we have two social workers who do a lot of different things. One does focus a little bit more on counseling, kind of that one-on-one talk psychotherapy. And then our other social worker, but really both of our social workers also have a lot of knowledge and insight and resources into a lot of different things, maybe different housing options, options for getting more help at home or in the community, connecting with maybe different support groups. That could be, of course, for yourself living with Parkinson's or your care partner to have a support group as well. And so a lot of times, you know, a neurologist can be a nice kind of entry point to meet with any other member of the team who can help make a referral or set up that recommendation. I know at Struthers, you're also able to kind of call and schedule a consult with one of our social workers kind of on your own as well. Or if maybe you're working with a PT or an OT or a speech therapist and you recognize that need for a social worker, you know, certainly asking them to help connect you as well can be a way to go.
Thank you. All right, Dr. Rayhak, we have a couple questions about treatment. Are there any problems using anxiety, depression medications with standard Parkinson's medications?
So I mean, generally, no, it's good to always think about different medications and how they might be interacting with each other. For the most part, carbidopa-levodopa, a lot of the standard Parkinson's medications are not going to have an interaction. There's a category of Parkinson's medication called MAOB inhibitors, so that blocks the breakdown of dopamine and will come up as a flag with pharmacists interaction with some of the antidepressants. So there is some dose adjustments and considerations with those class of medications that we have to think about. There's also clinical pharmacists that are good. We haven't mentioned those as part of your team, but a good resource if you're concerned about medications you're on and how they're all interacting or side effects, and meeting with a clinical pharmacist can be helpful.
That kind of goes into the next question about what indications would trigger like a cognitive assessment or a neuropsychology, like an MRI or other scans.
Yeah, so additional testing, I mean, I think it would depend on the individual. Again, that's why it's helpful to have specifics on maybe what you're noticing and the time frame of what you're noticing, how impactful it is. If we can attribute it to something else that we can correct and see how that goes, then we might not need to go to the next step of additional testing. But certainly if it's some significant changes or if you have any concerns, I have a fairly low threshold for doing some additional testing with the neuropsychologic assessment. It can be scary to do that just because sometimes there's answers you're not sure you're ready for, but it's just helpful to have that information in most cases.
Okay, thanks. Laura, question for you. You talked a lot about exercise, but do you have any other benefits to movement or exercise that can help with other Parkinson's symptoms other than motor skills and mood?
Yeah. So I think honestly, exercise benefits just about every symptom of Parkinson's that you may deal with. You know, even thinking of cognition and how your brain's working, like Dr. Urehek talked about, some exercise can really help with those sorts of things. And then,
How about sleep? That was another question.
oh, yes, sleep, a huge one. I think exercise plays a huge role in our sleep. And I hear all the time, I went to my exercise class today. I know I'm going to sleep better tonight. A lot of times we find just the less active we are, the more we are maybe sitting around, kind of the more fatigued and tired we get, which can affect, how you're sleeping at night. And so even that fatigue, if that is something that really affects you, we like to talk about exercise as something that is non-negotiable. Of course, when you're fatigued, you're tired, you haven't slept well, I might not expect the same out of you as I would on a day where you're refreshed, you're feeling really good. But any sort of, movement, exercise, a short walk, a quick stretch break can really help fight fatigue, can improve your ability to fall asleep and stay asleep, which can just lead on to benefit, again, kind of all symptoms of Parkinson's that you're dealing with. Yeah.
And then addressing, so that we haven't touched on this, but there's physical therapy for bladder function, pelvic floor dysfunction, which I don't think is often recognized as much as it should be, as the benefits of helping with bladder control for men and women and bowel as well, and helps all those core muscles and balance. So important to recognize.
Yes, thank you. That's a big one.
All right, I have a question online and in person, talking about social time and thinking about any alcohol consumption in moderation, but wondering if there's something to think about when having a beverage with Parkinson's, or even having speech changes.
Yeah, so alcohol and the brain, it's complicated. Most things will say that alcohol is not good as far as brain function and overall health. I am a fan of moderation and also paying attention to your quality of life. And if that glass of wine or whatever it is really important to your day and your quality of life, just be mindful of how it impacts you, because I think it does start to affect you differently and might affect your speech if you're already having some speech difficulty and difficulty with articulation. There are things that can impact that. If you're more fatigued, if you're having a drink or two, you might notice that more. Certainly balance can be more affected after having a glass or two. So be careful of how it affects you and maybe back off a little bit on how much you have, if you notice.
Thanks. Some other questions about more symptoms. What could a speech therapist help with swallowing? Would that be part of your interdisciplinary team?
Yeah, so certainly changes to swallowing are something that we see commonly happen with Parkinson's, and your speech therapist can work with you on certain strategies on how to make sure you're swallowing effectively. In some cases, they may even look at like the consistency of the liquids you're consuming or the foods that you're eating and kind of make some recommendations in that regard to help with swallowing. Of course, they work a lot on like your voice volume and projection, but even our speech therapists do touch a little bit on like some cognition, some cognitive changes. I think some like word finding difficulty was brought up earlier, and they can also kind of work on strategies for that with you in addition to speech and swallowing.
Okay, we'll keep the mic with you.
Okay.
We talked about mood changes, and sometimes people with Parkinson's can have masked facing, so they're not able to reflect any change of expression from happy or sad, and can result in a lot of confusion and communication. So do you see a lot of issues with flat affect?
That definitely is something that we see a lot. And it does, of course, affect kind of your intonation, your communication. And so, I think that that is something that, sometimes we'll even do like some facial exercises, facial movements, but even like I believe working with like your speech therapist, maybe on intonation or expression a little bit more is something they can do too.
Okay, thank you. All right, Dr. Rahek, I've got quite a few questions about some other complementary alternatives for treatment for Parkinson's. First one up is medical cannabis research. Any updates on that?
Yeah, so cannabis is always a hot topic and a growing area, obviously with changing laws, federally still illegal. So there's still a lot of restrictions on use and research because of that, and how you can travel with it and how it affects things. So I think it's important to be aware of that. Like a gun owner told me recently that if you have a gun license, you can't be certified for cannabis, even though it's legal in the state, because it's a federally controlled thing. So there's those kinds of things that you might not think about, but are important to be aware of before you start dabbling in that area. The bottom line is we don't know for sure. I definitely have a lot of patients that have tried it more and more because it's accessible, and have anecdotal reports of them saying it can help with pain and sleep and mood, sometimes tremor and other symptoms. Cognitively would not, as far as I know, be something that would be beneficial. So it can even do the opposite, where you feel kind of loopy, if you're, depending on how much you're using of the THC component of the cannabis products. So definitely use it with caution. Talk to your healthcare providers, ideally before trying it.
Thank you. Any thoughts about benefits from cold plunges? Or I know it's been a lot of hype lately on the internet, seeing people jump into freezing cold.
I know I did. This is popular. I don't know the details of the research on it, but it does seem to, based on reports I've heard of, have some benefit in mood. I don't know if you know anything more, Laura, but quite a shock to the system, I think. And then I would just say use it, with caution if you wanted to try that. But it does seem to potentially help with mood, anxiety that I've heard about.
Okay. You touched a little bit about diet. Is there any difference between where we're getting protein from animal-based to vegetarian or plant-based protein?
Yeah, so that's still being worked out. I mean, there's definitely some evidence or research that's looked at plant-based diets and trying to eliminate all animal-based protein and potentially some additional benefits, but there's not enough research to say that you should cut out all meat protein. Protein can come up with your medications because carbidopa-levodopa, can be interfered with by protein. And so a lot of it depends on the timing of when you're eating it. I'm not aware of any differences between the type of protein. It's usually the quantity. So like how much protein you're taking in at one time will have more interference if you have a large amount of protein with your meal too close to when you took your medications. Or some people are so sensitive to any protein throughout the day, you'll notice can affect and feel more off or feel like your medications aren't working. But I've had patients that restrict protein too much, and then you don't have enough protein to fuel your muscles and keep strong, keep that exercise feel going. So still important to work with a nutritionist or dietitian if you're having difficulty, or just really monitor how much you're getting.
All right. More back to cognitive questions. Can you share a little more about hallucinations and how that could occur with Parkinson's symptoms? Would that be considering like a Lewy body diagnosis with Parkinson's? And would it be a difference in treatment for cognitive issues?
Yeah, so hallucinations is tough because I mean there are different meds or different stages along the way that you might experience this, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you have dementia or Lewy body dementia. Again, that's a complicated terminology. If you have dementia with Lewy bodies, certainly hallucinations can be impactful earlier on in the disease. And then with the Parkinson's disease dementia, you can have more hallucinations as a part of that. Medications can play a role. So it's a combination of changes in the brain and those brain circuits and how your brain's processing visual information that can trigger more of the hallucinations, and you have more difficulty interpreting things in your environment. So if you're at night, if it's low light, if there's a lot of things that are around you that are hard to interpret, you might be more likely to have illusions where you think a lamp is a person, or hallucination where there's people there. So thinking about what's triggering it, and adaptive things like keeping more lights on, or keeping windows open, or just ways of kind of mitigating that can be helpful. It doesn't necessarily affect treatment. I mean, again, if there's medications we think that are primary triggers for it, we can look at scaling back on the medications or adjusting your medications, and then that can help. If it's from the disease process, we can look at other options of adding medications. But if it's from dementia with Lewy bodies versus Parkinson's disease dementia, we kind of address it in the same fashion.
Laura, this question is for you. From a caretaker, for Parkinson's patients who have a cognitive decline, do you recommend forcing exercise? Not intensive, but like a walk, so they get benefits from movement?
That is a good question, and certainly can be tricky and kind of delicate, but I do think the more we can encourage exercise, a walk, the better. You know, especially with like that symptom of apathy where I just don't really have the get up and go to do what I used to do, or, you know, from cognitive changes or other mood changes. I think if we can kind of help facilitate and kind of give a little push in the direction to do exercise regularly, it is a good thing that is going to benefit your body and your brain. Or even like attending a exercise class regularly might be a way to kind of push some of that activity where you have a set schedule that you're following.
Yeah, so I think the source of who is suggesting the exercise or demanding that you exercise is important to consider, because I think a lot of spouses or caregivers are trying, but it puts strain on the relationship, and eventually that person might get good at just saying no or not listening. And so if you have someone else that can encourage, like the intergenerational comment, I was talking to someone just the other day, grandkids are great motivators. So if you can enlist grandkids or some other family member on getting you to go do the exercise, I think that would go a lot better. So trying to be creative about motivation is helpful.
All right, thanks. We have time for just a few more. Got a couple questions about the sleep-wake cycle, Dr. Rayak.
Yeah, so I had that up on the slide and didn't necessarily touch on that. So as Parkinson's progresses, like even early on, people with Parkinson's can have trouble with sleep based on different things: pain, your tremors, stiffness. If you have the REM behavior disorder, that's the sleep disorder where you act out your dreams, that can impact the quality or safety of your sleep. And then as the disease progresses, it can get harder for your brain to sort out what a natural sleep-wake cycle would be. And you might get more sleepy during the day and have a harder time staying awake during the day, which then will lead you to be more awake at night. And that can be disruptive both for your day function and any caregiver or someone that's living with you. There's different strategies around that. I mean, definitely the more you can be out and active during the day. So if you're sitting at home in your recliner, it's a lot easier to doze off than if you have someone that you're talking to or an exercise thing that you're going. So that's why that schedule and routine of getting activities into your day is so important, to keep you awake during the day, which will help you sleep better at night. And then there are some things like medications or melatonin or other things that you can add in or talk to your doctor about if you're still having trouble sleeping at night.
Great, thanks. One other question, going back to kind of Parkinson's basic information. Can you just share a little more about like where the causes come from and how it can be genetic, environmental, and is it something to be thinking about with your children or grandchildren?
Yeah, good question. And it's still a challenging question to answer. We think of it as multifactorial at this point. Like it's definitely not considered a genetic disease, but the more we learn about the genetics of it, the more we're finding that there are mutations that can cause it or increase your risk of getting it. Most genetic mutations increase your risk, but isn't a certainty. So if you didn't have Parkinson's and found out you had the mutation, it doesn't mean you're necessarily going to get Parkinson's. Or if you have it, it doesn't necessarily mean that your kids or grandkids are going to get it, but certainly can increase the risk of getting it. So paying attention to that, paying attention to the research, the better we get at early diagnosis or early treatments that'll be effective, are going to be even more important as we discover better ways at treating the disease or stopping or slowing down the disease progression. Other risk factors like pesticide exposure, head injuries, those things seem to also play a role. But again, it's so many years usually between that insult and the onset of the disease, it's really hard to track what factors were part of that. But there's a lot of studies still going into that to see if we can be better at mitigating those risk factors.
All right, thank you very much. Do either of you have any other comments or things you wanted to mention that the questions may have brought up?
I did, I meant to talk about hearing loss because that's another thing that can impact how someone is engaged in the world and conversation. So it really is important to address hearing loss. It's a pain to wear hearing aids, I've heard. I don't have to yet, fortunately, but if you have hearing loss, there's a lot of good evidence that wearing your hearing aids and being able to hear better will help you with cognition and engagement. So that's important.
That's a great last reminder for us to check all facilities, right? Not just cognitive, could be ears or other things. Well, let's give a round of applause to Dr. Rick and Laura for joining us. My name is Stephanie Alberico. I am a researcher at the University of Minnesota, Udall Center, and I have the pleasure of welcoming my colleague, Dr. Leo Almeida. Dr. Almeida is an associate professor in the Department of Neurology, specialized in movement disorders. He has a large expertise in deep brain stimulation for movement disorders, including Parkinson's disease, essential tremor, and dystonia. Many of you probably already know him because he is an expert in intraoperative brain mapping for the DBS surgery procedure. He works he sees patients in many of our mHealth Fairview neurology clinics, focusing on DBS, and he's also a clinician researcher and he is researching how to develop the field in a way to better deliver neuromodulation therapy for patients to continue to improve patient outcomes. We are very excited to have Dr. Almeida here with us today and to see what's new with research. And please help me in welcoming Dr. Almeida.
All right. Well, thank you, Steph, for the words. I'm not that good. I just have a good team. So, but I appreciate the invitation to come and give a quick talk about research, because I think that's one of the questions that we get asked the most, right? So people come to clinic and they say, Dr. Almeida, what's new in research? Is there anything coming down the pipeline? So, and of course, this is something that if you were to give this talk tomorrow or the day after, there's always something new, right? So we want to give a general overview of this, and then we'll take some more questions. So I'm Leo Almeida, one of the movement disorder neurologists at the U. Those are my disclosures there. There's nothing is pertinent to this lecture. Well, it looks like the animations are a little off, but let's advance everything here. All right, so we've heard quite a bit about Parkinson's disease this morning, right? So it's one thing that we hear quite often in clinic. It's like, well, I actually diagnosed a couple of my golf buddies, not too long ago because, it's like everybody's getting Parkinson's, right? So why is that? And I think it's a number of things, even when you compare not too long ago, when I was in training, we often will get history of folks who were they've hopping around, they've seen orthopedic docs and got shoulder replacements, and they've seen 10 different doctors until someone suspected Parkinson's disease, right? And nowadays, I think we're seeing that we get into diagnosis more frequently, more quickly, I should say. And the population is aging, right? So statistically speaking, as we get older, we may lose some of those dopaminergic cells, and we're more likely to develop Parkinson's-like symptoms. So a number of reasons why we're seeing more Parkinson's, and of course, with the growing numbers, there is a pressing need of pushing research forward, right? So I'm not going to take too long talking about this, but I usually like to group symptoms of Parkinson's into the motor symptoms or symptoms related to mobility. Then you have non-motor symptoms, so symptoms that are associated with something else besides movement, so autonomics or blood pressure fluctuations, constipation. You also have a group of symptoms called neuropsychiatric symptoms, so depression, anxiety, and so on. Cognitive dysfunction can be part of that as well. And then you have other groups of symptoms that we call associated symptoms, which will go into drooling and swallowing dysfunction and speech and so on. So you can put some of those symptoms sometimes in different buckets there. But I think this slide is super important. And let's see if this is going to come up the right way. But this is from a publication that came not too long ago by Melissa Armstrong. She's a colleague of mine at University of Florida. And I will bet you money, if you go to the medical school right now and you get a medical student say, can you prepare a presentation on Parkinson's disease? This is the picture they're going to find. If you Google Parkinson's, that's the picture that they're going to put up there, right? Of this old gentleman who looks like he's about to break, this very frail. When in reality, we know that Parkinson's is not that, right? So Melissa Armstrong had a paper on JAMA Neurology talking about revisiting the diagnosis of Parkinson's, right? Because Parkinson's comes with multiple phases, right? So it's very variable. So if you think about, if you know someone with Parkinson's, if you have Parkinson's, think about when your symptoms started, right? So a lot of folks, they are, let's see if this works. They're similar to, this woman here, active, out and about. Maybe there is a little bit of, let's see if I can, oh, there you go, okay. Maybe the foot turns in a little bit when she goes for a longer walk, right? Or maybe there's a little bit of tremor that kind of comes and goes. And that's kind of it for a little while, and eventually symptoms may progress and you can start seeing some other things like tremor, slowness, stiffness, and so on. So, so sometimes when I see people in clinic say, I think we're getting a little sprinkle of Parkinson's, we get some early symptoms of Parkinson's, that's usually what we're talking about, right? And then, as the disease progresses, you may have, somebody who is a little more into the symptoms with off times and on times medications, may not work 100% of the times. And then you do have, a percentage of folks that they progress to more advanced cases. They start requiring, assistant devices and so on. But it's important, to say that Parkinson's is not always going to be that person with a lot of disability and so on, so it's a big spectrum, right? And that's important because for us to treat Parkinson's, we have to understand Parkinson's. So oftentimes when I see folks for the very first time, part of my speech is we have to understand your Parkinson's. We have to figure out how your Parkinson's looks like, what's the combination that's going to work for you. And that combo includes medications, therapy, exercise, a number of different things, right? And so that's important because our goal, I always tell folks, our goal is to keep you out of the doctor's office so you can enjoy life, right? So improving quality of life and independence, so you can carry on with your day-to-day activities, right? And again, it takes a team. I mean, we've heard a few times already about interdisciplinary management. So we have care providers, which include neurologists, nurse practitioners. For surgical cases, we have surgeons and neuropsychologists and the entire rehab team. You know, and then depending on how large your team is, sometimes you have MTM pharmacists, psychiatrists, social workers, dietitians, and so on. So every team has a slightly different setup, right? This is just a picture of some of our several team members. It will take 10 slides to put pictures of everybody there. So just a few places, like Stephanie mentioned, we cover different locations. We have we try to decentralize care because not everybody likes to go to Minneapolis, fighting traffic, you know, so we like to, you know, make sure that we get closer to the community, right? So we'll go and serve the folks who need us. That's all great, Leo, but what about research? You know, so let's talk about that. And this is gonna take like 2 seconds to go over this. This is just to show, this is a picture that one of our former fellows for a review paper, and we came up with this. And this is, again, just to show how complex the structure is inside of a cell, right? Inside of a neuron. And if you think about that, there are people who develop their entire careers trying to investigate one of those several cogwheels inside of that. And you know, of course, as a clinician, we only see the final product, right? So we see someone who's having difficulties walking, difficulties moving, maybe a tremor, and so on. But in reality, if you were to have a, you know, a microscopic look at those cells, it may be that the combination of pieces that are malfunctioning inside of that cell is different, right? So, you know, let's say if the problem is, you know, up here, maybe down here, maybe down here for one person in a different location for a different person, but it's showing up as the same thing. How do you expect that person to respond to a drug that is supposed to work on one of those teeny tiny pieces of it, right? So I think that's a big challenge that we face with some of those complex disorders like Parkinson's disease, right? You know, and we'll talk some more about that. So, and I think, you know, part of the piece is to solve the puzzle, right? So figuring out the Parkinson's puzzle is one step towards the cure, right? So ideally, you want to have, so the vision that we have when we're treating someone with Parkinson's is, can we avoid, or can we slow down, or can we clear up, you know, protein aggregation, right? Because that's the final product. So you have lots of different pieces that they're not functioning correctly, and then that leads to accumulation of protein, and that's what starts causing, you know, starts to be associated with some of the neurodegeneration, right? So can we come up with something to prevent protein aggregation, right? So something to prevent potential disease progression. So, and we'll see that, you know, that might be some movement towards that, right? So can we catch things before the degeneration progresses and before actually the symptoms develop, right? Because some of those changes in the brain, they happen way before we start having the symptoms that we end up calling Parkinson's disease, right? So for those folks who already have symptoms, right? Again, stop progression is a big deal, right? Prevent things from getting worse. You know, it's at least in my mind, is something that is super important. But again, preventing complications, preventing worsening, you know, are there therapies to potentially restore some of those cells that are already gone, right? And then for folks who have more advanced symptoms, again, if we can stop anything from progressing, I think it's still a good thing to have, but, you know, mostly focusing on regeneration. And of course, symptomatic management, that's what we have currently, you know, still comes to play, right? So how does research play into that? And that's something, you know, I sign up for as many newsletters as I can, because many times I'm in clinic or I get my chart messages. Have you seen this study? You know, have you seen this? Have you seen that? What's your opinion on that? And I think that's important to keep up with that. But it's also it's important to keep in mind the different phases, you know, for some of those clinical trials, right? So you have, you know, preclinical studies, so those studies before they get to humans. And then you have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and that basically goes, the study becomes more and more complex in terms of looking at the early stages in terms of tolerability, all the way to figuring out dosing. And by the time he gets to phase 3 studies, phase 3 trials, that's when he goes for regulatory bodies to potentially approve as a new drug, as a new indication, right? So it's important to talk about that, because sometimes, some compounds that are being tested in phase 1, they may not make to phase 2 or phase 3 because the results don't get as promising, to make it worth the investment. So where do I find updates for this, right? Of course, the biggest source of information that you can find is clinicaltrials.gov, which is quite complex, to be very honest with you. It basically can find information about any clinical trial for any type of condition you can think of, including Parkinson's, right? But it's a very complicated website to navigate through, but that's where you're gonna find the biggest bulk of information there. But I like these other two sources, and I think, depending on how much you wanna look into it, that might be something that can fit what you're looking for. So this one is called PD Trial Tracker Info, which is created by this woman, Sue, who she's a caretaker of someone who has Parkinson's. And basically, she has a background in software management. So she basically created a way, so she curates clinicaltrials.gov and just basically gets everything that is Parkinson's related and puts that together. And it's very like disease, drugs to stop disease or new formulations of this, so it's really like broken down in a nice way. So everything's compiled and, geared towards Parkinson's, but the main source is clinicaltrials.gov, so it's a way to bypass the complexity of clinicaltrials.gov, right? And then the other one that I found that I think it's pretty interesting is this guy who created scienceofparkinsons.com. His name is Simon. So he used to work with Parkinson's clinical trials. He's a PhD, has a PhD in neurobiology. He's a guy from New Zealand. And he puts that, this is on his webpage, so he wants to explain the science of research in plain English that his non-scientific mom will be able to understand, right? And it's less technical, and you really kind of breaks it down. It's like a blog, right? And say, well, those 2 new drugs are being investigated right now, phase 1 versus phase 2. Well, this is coming to phase 3. What's the repercussion of that? What's the promise in this, right? So may not be as up to date because he really relies on something new, something different coming for him to talk. But it's another way to look into that in more details. So we could spend hours talking about every single one of those different trials here, but I think I was trying to come up with putting everything into one single slide. And Paul Tewitt, who is a colleague of ours at the U, he recently gave a talk and I said, "Can I steal that slide, please?" So this kind of gives you a flavor of what's potentially coming down the pipeline in terms of clinical trials for the next few years, right? Because if you think about that, every time a study is designed, right, so it has to go through regulatory bodies, identify centers, and recruit folks to participate, and then have results published, so to see whether we want to move forward with this or not as a community and from an industry standpoint, right? So it takes several years to move from the different stages, but I think it's encouraging to see that we're having some new drugs reaching phase trials. Some of them are phase 2, but some of them are phase 3. And when you look at some of the mechanism of action, so we're looking at things like LRRK2 inhibitors, so specific genes, so inhibiting expression of genes, so inhibiting some of that accumulation of protein and those kinds of things. So if it's reaching phase 3, that means that for the first 2 stages of it, it's shown a good amount of promise, right? So this gives us, a lot of encouragement. And again, is this going to be something that's going to fit everybody? Maybe not, but because maybe it's going to fix one of those cogwheels that might be malfunctioning within that cell. But again, it might be one of the pieces of the cocktail there, right? So more to come on that. So every year, I think it would be a good idea for somebody to give an update on some of those clinical trials and see if there's something that's moved from phase 2 to phase 3 and so on. And once it reaches phase 3, is there an action towards actually getting this readily available for us to prescribe, right? And again, if you notice here, there is one particular study that actually the U is one of the sites called SPARKS-3. That is not it's kind of a drug, but not a drug. It's exercise, right? So, like I tell everybody, exercise like a miracle grow for your brain, keeps those brain cells healthy, brings good nutrients to your brain, right? And what we've seen is it's not just folks, like we heard today, everybody feels better, you sleep better. But we actually see that there are changes in the brain now that we've been able to measure when people exercise, so has a lot of good benefits there. And again, because meds are not the answer for all questions, right? So non-drug research is just as important. So we're mentioning again SPARKS-3 trial, which is a multicentric study looking at moderate to high intensity exercise in Parkinson's disease. Just a shout out to the UDOL Centers of Excellence as well. We have dedicated federal funds allocated for research. We've heard more already about this. And again, a lot of the preclinical research that leads into some of the stuff that we are seeing now going towards drug development, comes out of many of the academic centers, right? So how we're doing on time here. I think we're kind of okay. All right, so we want to make sure we save some time for questions. So that's the other question that we get, right? Are there things coming down the pipeline? And I select a couple of things, right? So I think the first one is the IPX203, which is by Amneo Pharmaceuticals, right? So it's the same concept of Retari. It's a modified version of it that's going to be a little easier in terms of maintaining stable blood levels of the medication. I think that's the main challenge, right? When you look at levodopa. Levodopa is a good drug. It replaces the dopamine that is low in the brain, but the issue with levodopa alone is a very unstable molecule, right? So anything breaks it down. So keeping it stable is a big challenge, right? So coming up with new formulations of levodopa, I think it's super important because again, we need a powerful tool to treat symptoms, and levodopa works very well, right? So there's an immediate release portion, which is carbidopa levodopa, and you have the extended release portion. So everything is inside that pill, it's we're getting closer, right, to have this because there's a press release from not too long ago, so February of this year, right? That maybe we're gonna have some updates. It's been with the regulatory bodies here, just waiting for approval. So hopefully this will be something that we'll be able to prescribe to folks in the near future, right? More to come. Of course, another excitement about this, right? And there's some of the background story that I remember I was in training, but when Retari came out, a lot of the big dog pharma companies went after Amneo trying to get that patent for that pill. Of course, let's try to do a generic form of it and so on. But some of those patents, they're pretty good still until 2028, right? But with a lot of legal back and forth that it's publicly available, you can just Google about it all and get into it. So there is a company that can potentially start working on a version of Retari in the near future, which will be generic. And again, I think the key point is, every time something goes generic, it may take a little while, but we may start seeing formularies being a little more forgiving, because I think, even though it's a good drug and there are all different kinds of assistant programs and so on for folks to be able to get into the therapy, I think the big barrier is still insurance companies, right? To be able to approve this, and you have to like fight and do prior authorizations and all those kinds of things, right? And still, many times, if they say we're not going to approve, we're not going to approve, and we have to kind of be creative and figure out other ways around it, right? So maybe, you know, if we have, you know, other options in the market that can potentially drive the cost down and make it easier for insurance to start affording, covering some of those medications to become more affordable, right? More readily available, right? So can that potentially drive the cost of extended release carbidopa, levodopa down, right? And, you know, it speaks towards affordability, right? So that's one. The other one is produodopa, right? Which I had the opportunity to be one of the co-investigators, you know, for that trial when I was on faculty at UF. So here in the States, I don't know if it has an official name yet. So it's still called the ABBV951, which is still under FDA analysis, but that's the subcutaneous version of levodopa, right? So it's actually fos levodopa, fos carbidopa, right? And it's a 24-hour infusion. So it's basically like an insulin pump, right? In a very simplistic way. So there is a subcutaneous access, and little by little, there's a little medication there that kind of goes into the system. And if we're gonna follow some of the approach that we did during the clinical trial, so that will be substituting at least a big portion of what folks are taking by mouth. It's going to be continuously delivered through subcutaneous tissue with the option to give extra doses if we need it. So in a way, it's a very similar design to Duopa. You know, there were a couple of companies that were exploring that, and one of them is AbbVie, which is the current manufacturer for Duopa, which is it's a treatment that it's been FDA approved now for a number of years, which is levodopa intestinal gel version of it, but that it's a little more invasive in terms of it doesn't rely only on the neurology team to be able to provide that therapy. We have to have good partnership with GI doctors because it involves placing a J tube, a feeding tube for the pump to be connected to and deliver that gel straight into the gut, right? So perhaps the subcutaneous one, it will be easier, more accessible in that sense because it doesn't really involve any surgical intervention in a way. And you know, so we'll have to see, right? So part of the excitement is what's, you know, it's something new, right? It's a new way to optimize levodopa therapy for folks with Parkinson's. And you know, it might have some repercussions on some already available from a continuous levodopa delivery standpoint, right? It wouldn't be a Leo Almeida talk if we didn't talk about DBS, right? And to be fair, every time I mention manufacturers, I always put them in alphabetical order. So, you know, so what's new on the DBS side of the world here for movement disorders? So we have a rechargeable device that's been approved and it just hit the market not too long ago from Abbott, which is one of the FDA approved manufacturers. So it has all the features from the non-rechargeable device now on a rechargeable battery. Boston Scientific has a new programmer interface. So now we're actually able to program the device while we can see the person's own CT scan and MRI right in front of us, and we can see the image to guide us if we need a little bit extra guidance from anatomy, right? And for Medtronic, we have a rechargeable version of Percept, which came to the market as the first device that provides chronic ability to monitor brainwave activity. Now that's also part of the rechargeable version. And this is fresh off the press, you know, so the ADAPT PD, which is the multi-centric trial involving different centers in US, Canada, and Europe, just got presented at the American Academy of Neurology meeting a couple of weeks ago. it was designed to be a non-inferiority trial, meaning it's not any worse than continuous DBS. Because the way we do DBS nowadays, I tell people like a crock pot, you set and forget it, so you put those settings there and that's it, and then, see how the person is doing like next week or next month, and next time you see the person, right? I give people a lot of homework. So this one, it may change the way we program devices, right? Because we can sense the brainwave activity, making an analogy to cardiac devices, right? So we have implantable defibrillators, so that thing is not shocking the person all the time, but if it goes into an abnormal rhythm, that's when it shocks, right? So to deliver on demand, right? So that's a therapy that's coming closer, right? So in the field of neuromodulation, we've had people who have dedicated their entire careers, more than 10 years, kind of looking to ways to build algorithms with experimental devices, trying to do what's called closed loop DBS or on-demand DBS. And that's, that may change the way that we program devices in the near future, right? So we have the studies already finished for enrollment. We're not enrolling anymore, but the results just got presented at the AAN, and it's just a step away from just going through regulatory bodies for approval. So it is on devices that are already there, right? So it's just going to be an update to the device, and we'll be able to deliver that as a therapy, right? And I think the interesting thing about that is I can't comment on personal experiences that I've had with this because I was part of the study staff. But the interesting thing that got presented there in Colorado at the AAN was the fact that patient preference for ADBS, right? So the way that the design worked was people would come in and they wouldn't know if they were on their chronic DBS settings versus the adaptive one, that it goes up and down and it makes adjustments based on brainwave activity. And of course, because everybody's different, but there was something about those settings that whenever people got asked, what do you prefer, A versus B, 98% of the folks, they prefer to stay on the adaptive DBS settings. And again, all those new things, they'll be available in the battery itself. So whenever the next battery can be implanted, some of that stuff will be available. So more to come on that, right? So there's more and more data out of that study that's gonna come out in the next few meetings. The AAN was just the first one. We have a couple of other meetings in the fall, so hopefully, if we refresh this talk for next year, this topic for next year, I should say, there will be more updates on that. Right? So, we're wrapping it up. I think we have a few more minutes to go, but I think the take home points here, right, would be we can't just come up with the cookie cutter recipe for Parkinson's, right? Because everybody's different, right? So I tell fellows and residents when they're in clinic with me, like if you've seen one person with Parkinson's, you've seen one person with Parkinson's because everybody's unique, right? I've seen siblings, like the same family, same genetic background, two different diseases. One person had tremor, the other one didn't. One person had dyskinesia, the other one didn't, right? So everybody's different, right? So again, why do we expect everybody to respond the same way to the same drugs, right? So I think more and more drugs with different mechanisms of action will be important for us to kind of figure out the cocktail that the person needs, right? And I think part of that will involve some pieces of if and when those therapies reach the market, it will involve reducing some of that neurodegenerative process, or at least stopping that progression. I think I don't know how close we are to restorative therapies make some of those cells grow back. There is some research going on with stem cells and so on. I just don't know if we have results to comment on, the significance of those quite yet. And again, for people who already have symptoms, we can't dismiss the fact that the symptoms are there, right? And we just have to figure out more efficient ways to optimize folks, make folks feel better, and more independent, right? So I think, having as many tools in our toolbox will be key here. And again, like I said, understanding how PD works, right? Like this started like, a long time ago with somebody who looked at people who were walking in the street and say, they're walking this way, they're shaking, they're having this, we'll call this Parkinson's disease, and we've been carrying over the same concept on and on, but, now understanding what's behind the scenes here in terms of Parkinson's, can get us closer to providing better care for folks, with PD, right? Will get us close to a cure, perhaps, right? And again, I think it's having more tools in our toolbox will be super important. And again, it's tied with a multidisciplinary approach. Those new tools will move us towards excellence in care for PD. So it doesn't matter how good you're doing. I always say that you can always do better, right? And we need more tools to continue to do even better every day. So if you're interested in research, right, I think the first step is talk to your doctor, right? It can be your primary care doctor, your neurologist, your movement disorder neurologist, again, understanding the phases of the clinical trials, which stage of testing that drug is important to tell us, to be able to tell you and tell us how close we are to be able to provide that to folks as part of our day-to-day in clinic. Foundations like Parkinson Foundation, Michael J. Fox Foundation, American Parkinson's Disease Association, so all those foundations, they are great resources for information, right? Like I said, I sign up for as many newsletters as I can because that's, the stuff like hot off the press, that's what we get some information there. And those are great ways to connect the community to the providers, because that's one of the issues, unfortunately, you don't get a lot of movement disorder people out there in the community. So getting access to those folks can be a little tough, right? Especially if you want to. So sometimes we have folks come into the clinic because they want to be part of the research opportunities and so on, but getting to that point that they get to the clinic, that they get their first appointment, is tough. There are so many hoops to jump through until you actually get to, to an expert hand, right? So, and then foundations are a big bridge, right? They're a very important bridge, making that connection there. Right, and I'm gonna stop here. I know Stephanie's already, standing over there, looking at me, giving me the eye. So that's my email. Feel free to reach out anytime if you have any questions. And thank you again for the invitation. Where do I go?
You'll want them for the questions.
Do I stay here?
Yeah, just right here, with the mic.
Okay. Okay. So I don't go anywhere. I don't go anywhere. I stay here. All right.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that talk. So before we get into some of the questions that we've gathered from this morning, I do want to remind everyone that we have these evaluation forms on your table. So if you have a few minutes while we're moving things along or kind of in a little break, just go ahead and jot a few thoughts down and then we'll collect those at the end. You're welcome to leave them on the table or hand it to one of the volunteers today. So before we, well, I guess now. So we did get a few questions about DBS this morning. And since you're the expert on DBS, then I figured you would be the perfect person.
We have
One
an
of-
entire table of DBS experts.
Yes, but they're not up here today.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
It's all on you.
All right.
So one of the questions was about the different symptoms. Somebody mentioned that tremors were really well managed with DBS.
Mhm.
What about other symptoms? What are your thoughts on that? And what about the different locations for DBS placement?
Okay, yeah, so that's a good question. So DBS works well. So if you look back at that table of the motor symptoms, right? So the tremor, slowness, stiffness, DBS works very well for that, right? So I usually talk about like 3 main indications for DBS. So one is what we call motor fluctuations, so when you have the off times and the on times. So DBS is good about smoothing that stuff out, so that roller coaster, it goes up and down and, you can't connect medications very well. You start tightening up the intervals. DBS works for that. Right, so it works for motor fluctuations. A good rule of thumb is anything that responds to medicine usually responds to stimulation. So let's say, when the medication wears off, can't walk, can't talk, can't move quite well, Sometimes people even feel a little anxious, they feel a little sluggish mentally when the medications wear off. So those things, and then you take the medicine kicks in, everything gets better. If it follows the pattern of motor fluctuations and we can improve motor fluctuations, that tends to get better, right? The only kind of exception to that rule is tremor. Sometimes we have cases of Parkinson's that the tremor is very refractory. So those where you can give a truckload of Cinemat, with everything else, the tremor is still there, and DBS can knock those tremors out, even if they don't respond to medication. And then the third indication is when folks have a dose-limiting side effect, and the prototype for that is dyskinesias, right? So let's say one tablet of whatever medication you're taking is not enough, but two is too much because you can't sit still, you're moving around, it's affecting your day-to-day, affecting your performance in your daily activities, right? So depending on which target we choose, we can have anti-dyskinetic effects. We can suppress dyskinesias and we can allow you to take the amount of medication that you need, right? So there are three targets that we use for brain stimulation. Most commonly, we use two out of those three, right? So one is the thalamus, what's called VIM, nucleus of thalamus, which is basically a tremor target. So we use that for essential tremor, which is a different condition. Can we use that for Parkinson's? Technically, yes, but it will work only on the tremor piece of it, so it won't work on the slowness and stiffness. For us to capture that, we usually go, and that's the reason why we usually implant the other two targets, which one is called the STN, or subthalamic nucleus, and the other one is called the globus pallidus interna, or GPI. And so those two, they catch all those symptoms, most of the times. And we really, again, there's no cookie cutter recipe, and every place does it a little bit differently. So we try to do a multidisciplinary evaluation before approving someone for surgery. And then we'll look at a number of different things. So there's an entire thought process that goes into it to decide this target versus this one.
Thank you. We have another one about, a little more specific about closed loop DBS.
Okay.
Any updates on how close it is to being approved by the FDA?
Yeah, so I mean, I wish I had like an exact date. That's something that every time I see the other folks who are part of the team and the folks who are working with the FDA on the Medtronic side, I always ask that question. So we have the same question. But in a very practical way, every time anything gets in the hands of the FDA, we usually look into 1 to 2 years, right? What I can tell is usually from an industry standpoint, every time that they get to the point that they start showing and publishing some of that data from those clinical trials, there is already something going on, in the backstage about submitting that to the FDA. Of course, they don't release those kinds of details, but, I would suspect, it's been, if it hasn't been submitted yet, it's probably in the process of being submitted as some of that data starts to come out. And then once it gets into the hands of the FDA, 1 to 2 years, depending on how much information they want. Because usually the way it works is that they will get so they will get the submission, they will analyze everything, and then they will go back to that company saying, well, we approve this versus we need more information on XYZ pieces of it. And then, there's a resubmission or a follow-up submission. So until they iron out all the details, it's sometimes we see things coming out both here in Europe at the same time. Sometimes it comes out in Europe and 6 months later it comes out here, so it's a little different, right? But maybe 1 to 2 years from now.
Fingers crossed. Great. So now switching gears a little bit, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the possible relationship between PD and the autoimmune system.
PD and autoimmune system. Yeah, it's a tough one, but what I usually want to tell folks is Parkinson's is a very jealous condition, right? So anything that's going on in your body, Parkinson's like to say, I'm here, right? So if you're tired, if you sleep deprived, if you're dehydrated, if you're coming down with a cold or a flu or a urinary tract infection, you know, if you have Parkinson's, if you know anybody who has Parkinson's, the analogy that I make is think about if you go to the beach and spend the day in the sun, you're kind of wiped out at the end of the day. That's like 10 times amplified in people with Parkinson's, right? So part of that kind of goes in, you know, maybe some of that kind of spills into how your immune system works. Let's say, you know, if for some reason your immune system is a little off and you're more prone to get an infection or something is just not right with your body physically, that can make your Parkinson's symptoms a little more exacerbated, you know. Do I think Parkinson's is autoimmune and there's something that changes that kind of triggers the disease itself? Probably not. You know, it's a combination of things, but I think, you know, finding a good balance physically and emotionally is very important to keep your symptoms in check, right? Along the same lines, psychological stressors, you know, good stressors or bad stressors, right? So, you know, somebody cuts you in traffic, if you're driving or you get aggravated with anything, that can make your symptoms worse, right? If your favorite team is playing on TV, you know, and if you go into a reunion of some sort, you're very excited about that, you may have a little more tremor, you know, so your body, you know, a little bit of dysregulation that happens in your body, you know, can potentially aggravate your symptoms temporarily.
You think we could do one quick one?
Sure.
Okay,
You're in control of the schedule.
don't tell them
I'm
that.
here, hey.
Okay, so you talked about Duopa, and somebody's wondering about how leaky gut could affect that.
He shouldn't. Yeah, he shouldn't. Because the place where we put the pump, the place where we put the feeding tube that connects to the pump is in an area that we know absorbs the biggest bulk of levodopa, right? So the leaky gut is a little, you know, it's a unique concept that talks about, you know, your intestinal flora and so on. So that can potentially speak towards medication absorption. But the fact that we're bypassing the fact that this is, it's no longer a pill that has to dissolve in your stomach and get to that, you know, to that particular piece of your small intestine to be absorbed. We bypass all that by putting a tube straight in there, and every little bit of time you have droplets of that gel being delivered there, so he bypasses that.
Thanks. Are you available if people have questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
great. So we're gonna move on to the next part, but if anybody has questions, I know you have a question, feel free to stop Dr. Almeida and he'd be happy to chat
Yeah,
with
you
you,
can
okay?
tackle-
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, no. Okay, so before we move on to the next, to our panel discussion, let's do a little bit more movement. We've been sitting for quite a bit now, okay? So let's stand up. I'm seeing a lot of shaking heads, nodding heads, saying yes, we've been standing too, or sitting too long. Great, so go ahead and stretch your arms out. Do some circles, get nice and cozy with your neighbors. Some arm circles. Now go the other way. Maybe get cozy with a different neighbor. Great. Okay, and then just take a few steps and shake your leg out on one side, shake your leg out on the other side. Please hold on to the table or a chair. And if not, then just roll your ankles. Roll your ankles. There you go. Nice. Great. Okay, so let's take a seat. We're going to move on to our next session. And I just want to take a moment to thank Dr. Almeida again for such a great presentation. And thank you everyone for your questions. We never have enough time for all the questions, but if you run into him or run into somebody else, please feel free to just stop them and ask your questions. So at this time, I would like to invite our panelists and our moderators to the stage. We'll have Terry, Liz, and John, and then be our panelists, and then Nisi and Kristen will join us as well. Terry, Liz, and John, thank you so much for being willing and open to talk to us. We are very excited to hear firsthand what your experiences were
and what research you participated in. Our panelists will be joined by Nisi Belts, who's one of our research nurses on our team, and Kristen Garland, who's a research coordinator with the Udall Center. So I'll just have them join me on stage here. I'll move. Well, yeah, and then Nisi, if you want to grab it there, and then I'll grab you a chair here. Over just a little bit.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. So we've talked a lot about the importance of research today, and Dr. Vitek mentioned in the beginning that we need you. We need research participants to help us move our research forward. But we haven't talked a lot about what it actually means to be a research participant. And so we're hopeful that today the research panel will help provide a little bit more information about what it means to be a research participant and just generally what their experiences have been. So we'll start first by just having each participant introduce themselves, how long they've been living with Parkinson's disease, as well as maybe a fun fact about themselves that they'd like to share. I'll have you go first.
Thank you. My name is John Hoschel, and I started this journey 16 years ago when I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And it's been an interesting ride. About 5.5 years ago, I had DBS performed, and it was really a miracle for me. And so that sort of encouraged me to participate in a clinical core study, and that involves a yearly visit where they evaluate both psychological and physical issues that are related to Parkinson's. Now, my brother-in-law always smirks when I say I just had my psychological evaluation and I'm still okay. But it's been really a worthwhile effort on my part to be part of that, because it's not only affirmed what I know about myself in terms of my response to Parkinson's, but it also gives me a chance to contribute to the Parkinson's community. And more than anything, that's probably been my biggest motivator.
My name is Terry Lamers. I was diagnosed 6 years ago with young onset Parkinson's disease. I was at 42 at the time. My journey, like everybody's, is a little different too. For the first 4 years or so of my journey, I was kind of pharmaceutical resistant. So even when I got to the point to want to take pharmaceuticals, nothing had worked for me. As of the summer of 2022, carbidopa, levodopa started working kind of as I had gone down the trail to do DBS. You have to do the kind of carbidopa, levodopa. So for the third time trying it, this time it actually worked about 6 weeks in. So I kind of turned back the clock, so to speak, a little bit with that as well. So I was kind of into research just because I've always been very curious. I love exercise. Gait for me is one of the things that was primarily affected early on. So I was always trying to figure out, like, why that was. And as much as trying to help for myself, I just want to definitely give back and help those that are coming down the trail behind me as well, because so many people have done studies to get to where we are today.
Is that all the interesting facts? There could be more. Oh, there's more.
No, probably. I mean, I'm married, a mother of 3. My kids were 1st grade, 4th grade, and 6th grade at the time. Now I've got 2 teens and a tween. So when you talk about reducing stress, that's kind of hard to do in my house. That's probably all I got.
So you're taking auditions, right?
Yeah.
My name is Liz Ogren. I'm coming to you from Edina, Minnesota. It was a long drive this morning. Not really that bad. I've had Parkinson's for about 17 years, they say. Before that, my kids used to sit across me at the dinner table and mimic me the whole time during dinner as I would wiggle or spin or twist, and they called me the nocturnal mom because I was always up in the middle of the night. So I had lots of interesting habits to match their teenage habits, which were equally interesting. They are now 28 and 26 years old. They were 5 and 7 or something at the time.
Liz,
I don't know if that adds up. So.
Liz, could
yep.
you speak up a little bit? Some people are
Yes.
having, yeah, thank
Oh,
you.
there we go.
Ooh, loud and
You
clear.
didn't miss anything. So it says, what kind of research did I participate in? Do you want to know that a little bit or just not yet? Oh, no, that's it. That's it. Okay. So that's it. My interesting fact is that I once jumped out of a perfectly good airplane with a one-armed man and did land on both my legs, and I'm here today to tell you about it.
Thank you for the introductions. And now I would like each one of you to tell us what kind of research you have participated in. We'll just kind of.
I participated and continue to participate in a clinical course study, which involves going in right now, anyway, it involves going in once a year for, again, a psychological evaluation. And then they bring me in without my taking, well, I would stop taking my Parkinson's drugs 24 to 12 hours before the exam. And then I would go in and have, they make a movie of me, a video of me walking down the hall and doing some special tests, including finger tapping and standing there and having somebody push me or pull me from behind me to see if I stand up still and things like that. And that's cool. It's really important because it sort of establishes a baseline of performance, so to speak. The biggest change comes when so I'm off my carbidopa, I'm off my amantadine, which I also take. But the biggest change comes when they turn off the DBS. And it's like it's just literally like a switch. And within a matter of seconds, my tremor is back. And I had pretty bad tremor. And so the DBS is really phenomenal in that respect. But the clinical course study also, again, it lays out a baseline for when I go home after I get back on my drugs and they videotape me a second time. I go home knowing sort of where I'm at. Have I improved? Have I stayed the same? So it's not just, it's a good, participating is a good thing to understand who you are and where you're at in your life.
For me, again, the biggest thing to get, I was curious, so I just, from the get-go, can you hear me now? A little bit? Okay. I kind of did a mix of range of all different studies so far. I did like the gene one and some of the ones through the Fox where you can just do the surveys because they're just kind of were quick gimmies to kind of join in. I thought those were very easy. Initially, I didn't qualify for any of the medication studies since I wasn't on any medication. So I did things more, there was ones with just kind of walking your gait. You have sensors that you just put on your shoes or around your ankle, really non-invasive type of thing. For one of the studies, the U of M came to my house. And then she had me put some different things and I did some sitting and squatting and again, super very easy things that hopefully gives them a lot of information and not much time given up on my side. I'm currently in a study with Strive PD, so they use my Apple Watch and I track all kinds of things for them. Dr. Araic, who happens to be my physician, then she gets those notes when I come to the clinical visit and she can kind of wade through it. I'm not quite sure what it looks like on her side, but she gets, but it does everything from your workouts to anything else you could think of that would be on your Apple Watch. And again, I guess I kind of fall in the camp of the more information is great information and hopefully somebody can sort it out on the other side. That's pretty much it. For me, again, just that sense of agency and feeling like you can help and help. The more insights you learn about yourself is helpful for yourself, but it really helps somebody else because there's always, even though we're all unique, the more you gather with other people with Parkinson's, you find out like, hey, oh, we both have the same kind of dystonia, or you have this, and what have you done for that? And there's just so much shared knowledge, and it's really great to get it to the experts' hands so they can do their stuff with it.
What kind of research I participated in? The first, my first doctor visit, I was asked to participate in a research study where they were trying to count the number of people with Parkinson's. I don't remember if it was in the state or across the nation, but it was an interesting, comprehensive study. If you think about it, I think about how full this room is right now and how important it is to meet everybody who has Parkinson's so they can get a chance to help improve the lot for all of us for tomorrow. I think the most, I participate in a lot of the same studies that Terry has participated in. And one thing that I'm afraid of doing is I'm afraid of getting off my meds for a certain amount of time because I'm afraid of what's going to happen. But recently, when I met with one of the doctors and had my DBS, which I've had for about 3 or 4 years, retuned, and it made such a huge difference that now I'm not afraid anymore of going off my medication for a little while. I can actually be comfortable without medication for a much longer time than I could have before. The most interesting trial I think I did was when amantadine was being retested for its effectiveness with Parkinson's symptoms. It wasn't originally that kind of drug or drug for Parkinson's. And I remember how much I learned from the nurse who was a study nurse. We'd sometimes spend 8 hours together during a day. It amazed me how much she knew about me and my Parkinson's. So it was just evident in the way she interacted with me throughout the day, several times. I don't know how many times we met, but it seemed like a lot of times. And I learned a lot about Parkinson's that way, which was an important thing, I think, going forward, to know a lot about what you have and how you can use that to help other people. So.
Thank you for sharing about the research studies you've participated in. I especially like the variety of the different studies that people can do. So the next question I'll ask is what or why did you decide to participate in research? Like what led to you want to be a participant?
Well, as I mentioned before, it's sort of a twofold thing. One is basic research helps me understand who I am and where I'm at, and the continuum over the 16 years or 50, over the 5 years anyway that I've been participating. But it also provides obviously data for the researchers, and this is such a hideous disease in the sense that it affects us all differently. You know, again, it takes more information across the spectrum to really understand what the disease is all about. But I felt I needed to contribute, but I also had a selfish desire to know where I'm at. I'm one of those weird guys who likes to know how things work, so that helped too. That was a motivator.
I think I fall in that same camp. I feel like the more you know, the more you can kind of come up with workarounds in your own life as well as for other people. Same thing again, wanted to help others. But also was curious if the YOPD status would be even more helpful. Help people determine which is just aging and what is symptoms of Parkinson's. A lot of the symptoms that I have now rolled back with the use of medicine, I just thought was kind of, I don't know, just my new state of being. And then I was like, oh, well, that actually was my Parkinson's because now I'm not as anxious, and some of those non-motor skills made a huge difference. And so I think one of the roles with YOPD is to help distinguish which category everything falls in a little bit more as well.
I decided to participate in Parkinson's research after that first experience that happened on my first day in the clinic. And after it went so well and made such a difference to me. And my second experience with personal research was going to the health club and having my brother basically drag me there and make me work out until I called uncle, you know. So I said, okay, I get it, I will work out. And it made such a difference in my feeling about myself, how well I felt during the day, my symptoms, that it sold me research can make a difference because it helps you understand what your disease is and how to help yourself.
And how was your experience participating in these research studies?
I think I answered that. How was my experience? The question is, how was my experience going through the research studies? And, you know, for the most part, I think it was really fun because you're finding stuff out right away, especially when you do a little quick research on gait and balance in the clinic, and you're done in 10 minutes or 20 minutes, or maybe there's 2 sessions and it takes an hour, but it's fun. You find out where you're at, and maybe you meet a challenge while you're there. Like you can name 50 animals that start with A or something like that. I was really good at that because I was a 5th grade teacher. I think it was fun. There was one experience that wasn't so fun, and that was what I want to say about that is that you always have the option of saying no. And in this particular case, I didn't say no, but I did realize that I could suffer through something that I wasn't very comfortable once.
Yeah, my experience was, it's always been very enjoyable. The being kind of close in parts with the different researchers, I feel like it's a good opportunity to kind of pick their brains, and you figure they've seen a lot of people with Parkinson's, so you learn a lot of insights. They're always asking your comfort level kind of throughout it all, even if you seem perfectly fine. Like Liz said, you always have the right of refusal, so to speak. I've never run into having that be an issue, but it's nice to know it's there, especially, you know, who knows what the study could be on, but they make you feel comfortable, and they have safety precautions in place. So they're doing a balance study and things like that. I've heard, you know, obviously they're gonna make sure that you don't get hurt. So you feel completely safe and comfortable throughout the process as well.
Yeah, I've had a great time with the staff. They've been just wonderful. And we try and get some humor thrown in here and there. But no, it's been a great team to work with. And I've always felt very comfortable and never felt at danger. But, you know, even when I was off my drugs, it was still interesting.
So it sounds like you've all had a positive experience thus far with research, but there might be some people in the room who are trying to decide if they're interested in participating in research or not. What would you just say to someone who might be on the fence about whether they want to participate or not?
Well, I think, you know, you sort of need to decide there are kind of two different kinds of research going on. There's sort of an invasive variety, which is a little more than I wanted to go through. But, you know, a commitment of a couple hours a month or a couple hours a year for that matter is just a small price to pay to get involved. So I can, you know, I encourage everybody to give thought to what it is that needs to be done to get Parkinson's under control.
Yeah, I like to think about all the categories that on a daily basis that I think of, like products and services and medicines that would help me and how I could help with that. And if you're on board with trying different medications, that might be something that you're well suited for. If you're better off helping with something like a gait study, there's just so many different studies and research opportunities out there. So I highly recommend just looking into kind of contacting the source themselves, and they can help steer you in the right direction for a study that you might be up for.
There are a lot of opportunities to get involved in this area. If I was talking with a friend who was hesitant about participating in research, I would tell them that they could be the one that makes a bigger difference than they thought. Again, a little bit of investment can be that difference. And I'm a reader, and I like to know what's going to happen. And so I would read. There's a lot of reading when you get involved in research sometimes. And I would read, and I would talk with trusted friend or family to just kind of go over the consent packet with me and make sure that I understood what was going to happen and go from there. Trust my instincts, because nobody wants you to get hurt, right? So they're not going to research you on things that are going to hurt you. That's not the objective. So put the fear away and go for it.
So it sounds like you guys have all had positive experiences with research. Would you guys say that you would participate in research again in the future?
Definitely yes.
Absolutely.
Most definitely.
I think that was the last question for us, for the panelists. And Stephanie, do we have time to take questions from the audience?
Yeah, if anybody has, thank you, first of all, that was great. If anybody has any questions that we would like to ask them while they're there and open and willing. Oh, thank you for this hand signals.
Gene Anderson, and I'm a caregiver for my wife. And after nearly 56 years of being married, it's been a wonderful trip for us, more meeting for us together. But is there any studies that indicate the ability of the caregiver to give the right kind of care in the outcome of the Parkinson's patients? Do you know of anything like that, where there's any information that would help the caregiver have a more positive outcome for the patient, Parkinson's patient?
I am not aware of any, and I'm kind of taking a look at my research colleagues, and they're kind of looking at me too, like they're unsure. Oh, Dr. Almeida. Come up here.
Yeah, I would just say also that the APDA, Parkinson's Foundation have a lot of great resources for caregivers. There's a lot of great books also that can give you tips, but I agree, it's difficult and anything we can do to help and provide resources, we're happy to.
I'll run back to my seat in a little bit, but uh, no, but so that's a great question. Sorry, I didn't actually see who asked. Okay, oh, yes. So Dr. Melissa Armstrong, she runs Parkinson's and atypical Parkinsonism and Lewy body disease clinic at University of Florida. She has an entire line of research about caregiver. So caregiver burden and caregiver experience. She has one dedicated research coordinator just for those types of studies, which I think it's a big piece of management of Parkinson's. That's a great question. So more to come, so hopefully there will be some publications coming out. When I left about a couple of years ago, she was getting some of that research off the ground. So hopefully we'll have some results to talk about in the near future.
Thank you, Dr. Almeida. Anybody else?
My name is Ron Douglas. My wife Rita, she's had Parkinson's since 2007 and has had DBS surgery on one side. I'm looking at you folks and you look all pretty decent. So I don't know if you've had, if you if you had DBS surgery on both sides. I don't know if you can tell me that and how's that working? And what's the process from day one till surgery? I mean, what does it take? How long does it take?
Well, I had DBS in 2000. No, actually, I was diagnosed in 2007. I had DBS, and it was right after, it was the first break in COVID. I had one side done. I was ready to have the other side done, but some things happened and it didn't happen. What's the process? I mean, from day one, I don't know, you have to go through all sorts of testing and MRIs and that kind of thing. And cognitive testing and neuropsych testing and to make sure that you got the stuff to have surgery, while you're awake in most cases, right? I don't know if we're still awake during the surgery. I think so. Yeah. It's kind of cool. So the scientists, looking back, it's like not a big deal now, but when it's ahead of you, you think it's a bigger deal than it really is, I guess. But when you see what the results can be, it, makes you say, I should have done it sooner,
But did it take you a week? Did it take you a year?
Just for me to say, I wish I would have done it sooner, took me a couple of years to say that.
Okay.
Because there was some adjusting that needed to happen, didn't happen right away, but yeah. Would I do it again? I mean, I don't think anyone's ever excited to have their head opened, but I think that, definitely knowing that, I think that science is advancing to that point and imaging to guide a surgery is advancing. So I think that, again, things are less scary than they used to be. And
I'll kind of pass it through because I went through the process to have DBS, but then because carbidopa levodopa ended up working for me, I went back to square one and started at the beginning of the race.
Okay.
So I started carbidopa levodopa at that point. That makes sense. So everybody always like, oh, did you have DBS? I'm like, no, I didn't have DBS. Now it's just in my toolbox for down the road if I need it.
And I was a little bit different. I started out with carbidopa, levodopa, and amantadine. And it got to the point where I was taking enough, but it still didn't control the tremor in my right side. So it took about a year for me to kind of come to agreement with my wife and Dr. Tuitt that the next step was really DBS. And then I was a good candidate for it. So there was a good year there where I thought, there was no way I'm going to let somebody drill a hole in my head. But I came around. I went through the process. It was kind of cool
Yeah.
because you're awake and they're placing that lead. And not only do you realize what a great team of
Yeah.
12 or more people in the room, but also it just felt like the right thing to do. And it took a while to get there, but it was worth it for me.
Both sides?
I have just one side. It's probably inevitable that I'll have to have the other side done at some point.
Okay.
But right now it's just one side. It was about 5.5 years ago that I had the DBS. And, other than people commenting occasionally about the egg on my head, it's been great. It's not for everybody, but when it works wonderfully.
Thank you. Thank you all for your time and all your comments and answering all those questions. So, say that again? Well, yeah. Unfortunately, we don't have time for more questions for this. I know this is always a great opportunity to hear firsthand from people in our community, but please feel free to approach them. And I think you guys are happy to answer questions, right? Okay. Thank you. Let's give them a round of applause.
All right. Thank you again to Terry, Liz, and John for participating in our panel and sharing such valuable information with our listeners. Also, a special thank you to Nisi and Kristen as well for your time and your dedication. Thank you. As we wrap up the program today, I encourage you to fill out your evaluation sheets that are on your table if you haven't done so yet. We truly appreciate your comments as it influences our future educational programs. So would really look forward to you guys doing that. Also, a big thank you to our sponsors today. At the gold level, we want to thank Amneal and Supernus. And at the silver level, we want to thank Acadia. And thank you to our bronze sponsors, AbbVie, Abbott, Boston Scientific, and Medtronic. Thank you. So a few fun updates from APDA. We will be joining Heart of Dance Dance Studio and the Midway YMCA to bring to you a Parkinson's dance workshop. This workshop will be held once a week at the Midway YMCA in St. Paul. Each week, Heart of Dance owner and instructor Andrea Mirinda will be teaching one specific dance per class, which will include the merengue, the rumba, the tango, and the swing. I don't do demos, by the way. So this program is $5 per person, which includes the 4 classes of each dance. And it includes a final celebration where you can invite your friends and your family to show off your dance moves. So we are excited to offer this program to our PD community. Okay. APDA will also be hosting our Connecting Through Art program at the Shoreview Community Center, which is about 2.5 miles from here. The program offers people with Parkinson's disease the space and the ability to express their feelings and their emotions and daily concerns through visual arts. So Connecting Through Art encourages participants to socialize as they participate in the art activity, which also helps them strengthen their fine motor movements. This is a free program designed specifically for people with PD and their care partners. We'll get to the next slide. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, and of course, our APDA Minnesota Optimism Walk will again be at Central Park's JC Shelter in Roseville on Saturday, September 14th. So our APDA Minnesota Optimism Walk is a fun-filled, family-friendly event It's a great way to support the fight against Parkinson's disease. Not only are you helping raise awareness for PD, but the funds raised by the Optimism Walk help us provide more programs and services right here in Minnesota. So this is a short 1-mile walk around Bennett Lake, which includes a silent auction, a cakewalk, face painting, a resource fair, and other great family activities. So we highly recommend that you create your own walk team or join a walk team, as well as register ahead of time online. It's easy, it's fun, and your donations are going to a great cause. Just visit apdaparkinson.org/mn. See if the remote works. There we go. So, what can you do to help APDA raise awareness in the fight against Parkinson's disease, as our motto is strengthen optimism, hope, and progress? First, you can refer others to APDA. You can form or join an Optimism Walk team. You can invite APDA speakers to events or support groups or fundraisers. You can invite or you can share your story with APDA and speak on behalf of APDA. So looking at the second bullet point, how can you share your time and talents with APDA? You can do this by joining the APDA's fundraising committee or becoming an APDA board member. You can also volunteer your time at an event such as this or maybe our Optimism Walk. And how can you donate? You can donate as an individual or a company through employee giving, becoming a monthly or annual donor to APDA, and including APDA in your planned giving. So I want to thank you all for attending the 2024 Spring Parkinson's Symposium. We would love to stay connected with you all, and the easiest way to stay connected with APDA is to sign up for a weekly e-newsletter. You can get connected by emailing apdamn@apdaparkinson.org, which is on the screen. You can also give us a call at 651-706-1739 or connect with us on Facebook by searching APDA Minnesota chapter. Thank you.
No. Now? Yes. Thank you. My name is Laurel Grimm. I've been over at the Parkinson's Foundation table today, so it was great to see those of you who could stop by. Thank you all for coming. We saw a bunch of faces, so if you didn't get a chance to see what's coming up over at our table over there, I want a quick run through a couple of our events you'll see on the screen. It's also in the packets that you all have at your table, so if that's a little bit closer, it's there for you to take home with you. That very last page will have some upcoming events. You heard about medical interventions, different therapies that can help manage Parkinson's, but here's your social prescription to get out in the community, to join us at some community events. We'd love to see you. Great way to spread awareness, just like Tony was talking about, and get out there and find the resources you need. So coming up first is our Moving Day Walk. This is one of our lovely teams from last year. It is next weekend. Hopefully you figured out some of your spring plans by now, and if you're around, we will be walking in Plymouth the morning of Saturday, May 4th. We love people who register ahead of time. It makes everything easier day of, but you're also welcome to just show up. So we have plenty of information at our table. The website is up here. I don't expect you to copy that down, but come see us at the table as you're walking out. We're happy to just sign you up. All it is writing down your name. So we're trying to make that easy, but this is a huge community gathering. We're expecting about 1,000 people, and we walk to end Parkinson's. So we want to walk with you and raise awareness, make sure that you can find the resources you need from our table and our community partners, get a good walk in, hopefully in the sunshine. Coming up next, we've got a summer calendar to share with you guys. We have Parkinson's Awareness Day at Target Field. This is at a Twins game on June 20th. Tickets do need to be purchased in advance. if you would like to purchase them in the section that we have reserved along with other organizations. So on that sheet that all of you have, that very last page, there is a link, parkinson.org/Minnesota Dakotas/events. That's a great place to find all of these. It'll bring you to that ticket link. You can, of course, come find one of us and we can get you set up as well. But there will be other organizations there with resources to share with our community about living well with Parkinson's. So this is a really fun one that we do every summer. After that, in July, on July 13th, one of our lovely board members, Dave Egamo, who's here today, has helped us with our second annual benefit concert at the Hook and Ladder Theater. This is part of their Under the Canopy series. So we have organized a benefit concert with the Flamin' O's, their second year performing in the Under the Canopy series for the Parkinson's Foundation. Is it Annie and the Bang Bang again, Dave? It is. Annie and the Bang Bang will be opening for them. This is a really fun outdoor concert. Tickets should definitely be purchased in advance so they don't sell out. So again, that event link on the page you guys all have can bring you to the ticket page. And I'm just going to throw a fourth one in there that might be on the page that you guys have. We will also have a resource fair with our community partners in Parkinson's care. So different kinds of living facilities, senior care facilities. We will be putting that on in August in New Brighton. So if you can make it here, you can probably find us in New Brighton August 1st. But all of our events and more information, we have a ton of resources to help people live well with Parkinson's, to support loved ones, to get the care that you need as a care partner or loved one, someone with Parkinson's, healthcare provider, wherever you might be in our community. We've got resources for you, information that we can share with you. So this is the best way to get a hold of us. It's on the papers you have in front of you. That's a lot easier than a screen. But I just want to point out, we have things online, recordings of programs like this, information you can read or watch or download and print. We have a wonderful helpline. Their number is on pretty much everything we do, but we're happy to give you a card with the number over at our table over there. The helpline will answer any question from anyone. So from someone with Parkinson's, from a care partner, from a healthcare provider. They're a fantastic resource, especially if you remember that I mentioned some event that sounds interesting and you don't know what it was, they can run through those with you. So please direct your questions there if you are looking for anything else after the program today. And lastly, my name and Aaron's name are up there. We also have another staff member, Caroline, at our table today. We would love to get in touch. So please come on over, grab something with our chapter phone number, or if you can read it up on the screen, jot that down. We're always here to help you connect with programs, education, research opportunities. And we really appreciate you being here today. So thanks so much.
Hey, we're almost there as our troopers. So maybe I'll just do it like this. I had a chance to look at some of the questions that you all put in this morning after you saw Dr. Vitek talk. And so I just want to address some of those questions. One of them was how to get involved in research. And I think we've heard from several people today of a couple options. Dr. Almeida mentioned talking to either your PCP or your general practitioner, or talking to your neurology specialist. Another option is looking at our website. It's at umn.edu. We also have a Twitter, X now. I should upload that little bird to an X. And we also have an email, so this will be shared with you all. So, and it's also in your packets, so don't worry about losing it. But it's just udall@umn.edu. If you have any questions left over from today that you feel are appropriate for our center or our university, please feel free to email us. We have somebody on that email that checks it regularly, and we can get the right person to answer your questions. Additionally, if you have questions about how to get involved in research, we have our wonderful Kelly Brown over there that a lot of you know. And she's a great resource on how to get in touch with people at our university for research. And we also have Grace Thompson, who just started with us, and she's going to be a great resource for you all as well. So we can't leave today without showing you how much or how many people really it takes to get this stuff done. So I'm just pointing up a few names of the people that are involved on our end. So these are the researchers, the clinician scientists that are involved in getting the ideas, the research, submittals, all of that. So these are the kind of the people in the background and in the foreground as well, getting those grant submittals. And with that, I can't put this up here without also putting you all. Because really, as Dr. Vitek mentioned this morning, we can't do our work without your participation. And your participation then leads us to do future work that is meant to help you as well. So again, we cannot do it without you. We need participants in our clinical studies. And by participating, you can help us help you. And it might not be tomorrow and it might not be next week, but if not you, at least somebody else down the line. And one of the other questions that I saw from this morning about the Udall Center was, what happens if we don't get the next grant funded? And Dr. Vitek wanted to make sure that I told you all that this is exactly what keeps him up at night. So that was a great question, but we would have to rely on philanthropy through the university. And there's also some bridge grants that are available that we can apply to that would hold us off until the next grant cycle. So that's a great question that hopefully we won't encounter soon, but you never know. So with that, I will leave this up. And now for maybe what everybody's been waiting for, the raffle. So we have 2 winners. And again, you have to be present to win. So we have Dale Rollins. Is Dale Rollins still here? Perfect. You win. Okay. And then Karen's gonna get to you. And then we have Jean Larson. Is Jean Larson? Great. There you go. Perfect. Well, we just want to thank you all again today for making it such a great program. We really enjoyed putting it together, having our vendors here, our partner organizations here to provide all of the information and resources that we have available in our community. And it was so nice to see a lot of new faces and meet a lot of new people and see people that I've been meeting down the line again, as well. So as you wrap up, just make sure you turn in your lanyards at either end of there are 2 double doors and there's a box in there that you can drop your lanyards. The evaluations, if you filled those out, just go ahead and either leave them on the table or pass them on to a volunteer. And we will see you next year, April 2025. Thank you all.